and welcome to your July 2nd, 2013 Board of County Commissioners meeting. We're going to stand for an invocation, Pledge of Allegiance. Afterwards, we're going to have a moment of silence for the firefighters that passed away in the Arizona blaze.
Dear Father, grant us serenity. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Glad to see everyone here this evening. Looks like we have a great crowd. We appreciate everyone coming. For those of you that are watching at home, this time I'd like to look for a recommendation for approval of the minutes and proclamation approval.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Okay, with that, we'll turn to the proclamation. I don't actually have it written from you. You ready?
Resolution 2013-111, proclaiming the week of July 27, 2013 as Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup Week in St. Lucie County, Florida. Whereas the Board of County Commissioners of St. Lucie County, Florida has made the following determinations. On Saturday, July 27, 2013, the Marine Industries Association of the Treasure Coast, in conjunction with the Florida Inland Navigation District, will conduct the 6th Annual Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup. The event is expected to attract over 950 volunteers who will participate in cleaning up the waterways of Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. There are 20 designated sites throughout the 3 counties that will serve as registration and disposal sites for the project. Numerous waterfront homeowners associations have been recruited to clean up their own waterfront. In 2012, more than 7.6 tons of trash were collected from approximately 125 miles of waterways. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of County Commissioners of St. Lucie County, Florida. This board does hereby proclaim the week of July 27, 2013 as Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup Week in St. Lucie County, Florida. This board urges the citizens of St. Lucie County to become involved with the efforts to clean up our waterways. Passed and duly adopted the 2nd day of July, 2013.
Well, look at this. Charlie and April, come on up. Glad that you're both here. How are you? Good to see you. April, Charlie, again. Why don't you tell us a few things about the cleanup effort and some of that?
Okay.
We'll give you the microphone, and then we have a...
Of course, this is the 6th year we've been doing this waterway cleanup. And last year, out of the 950 volunteers that we had in the 3-county effort, 408 of those volunteers came from St. Lucie County. And those volunteers removed 4.5 tons of trash from our St. Lucie County waters. So St. Lucie County really shows up for this event, and we very, very much appreciate that. And we appreciate your continued support. Anybody who wants to be involved, it's very easy. Just go to our website, tcwaterwaycleanup.com, click on the registration, online registration, and just let us know what site you're going to report at. Everybody will get a event T-shirt. The commissioners all got last year's today. They'll get this year's if they show up. And if you're a boater or if you're a watercraft enthusiast and come out with your watercraft, you'll get a birdie to fly, and those become very collectible. You'll also be invited to Volunteer Appreciation Barbecue on the 11th of August, which will take place at the Fort Pierce Yacht Club. And that's when we'll have tallied all of our results from that day and be able to tell everybody how much trash we collected in the 3-county effort. So thank you for your continued support. And thank you, Charlie, for being our team leader for St. Lucie County. It's a big job, and we're glad you do it.
I have only one thing to say. It's so great that St. Lucie County is behind it, but we need to get our state and national leaders to get behind this effort to clean up our most valuable asset in this region.
I agree with you. And for the record, it's April Price and Charlie Hayek, for the record.
No, you get to join us.
And while you're taking a picture, I'm surprised that Captain Don Voss isn't here. He's been spearheading these efforts in the communities for quite some time.
if I may, Mr. Chair, before you leave, can you give them a sense of the number of people that actually show up? Because I was very impressed with what you had said.
I was going to say, our goal is 1,000. We've come just short the last 2 years. We've been right around the 950 mark. So if everybody brings one more person, we'll exceed that mark, and that would be great. So, and the key thing is that it's a very, very dedicated group. Many of these folks have been doing this cleanup with us each year for the past 5, and we'll be doing it again this year in year 6. And although this is a one-day effort, the awareness goes on throughout the year, and we do support other cleanup efforts throughout the 3-county area all year long. So we all work very collaboratively together, and that's a very special thing. So if you want to be involved, just let us know.
Great job.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, one of the things that they've found when these cleanups occur, they've found nicotine in the dolphins that have passed when they do the necropsy on the work on the dolphins, and it's because they're ingesting cigarette butts that have been thrown on beaches and into the waterways. So if you're a smoker, please be good about it and not throw your cigarette butts on the beaches and in the waterways. Because it is getting into the dolphins' bloodstreams. So
you're sure it's not heavy smoking dolphins at the sandbar?
Well, I've seen a few dolphins. That's a whole other story.
We literally have removed tens of thousands of cigarette butts from the beaches, and it's probably in volume the highest thing we remove every year in this cleanup effort. Too many to count, way too many to count. So our world is not your ashtray. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. This time we're going to turn to general public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on a non-agenda item, please feel free to do so at this time. If you wouldn't mind, please provide your name and address for the record.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairman Mowry, commissioners, staff, and citizens. For the record, my name is Robert Barry Mucklow. I live at 1891 Southeast Aries Lane in Port St. Lucie. As a property owner, taxpayer, and 41-year resident of St. Lucie County, I attended the June 18th commission meeting, which was last month, and I was gratified to see signs of progress in the county's quest for a solid waste thermal conversion facility. The commission and county staff are to be commended for the long-range planning needed to effectively deal with this obvious need. Thank you for your planning efforts. I appreciate them, and I'm sure others do too, even though they're not here vocalizing it like I am. Now let me segue to another planning topic. During that meeting, general public comment section, Mr. Mark Gotts announced details of a 750 conference, subtitled Summit Meeting Number 3 in West Palm Beach. I've attended a 750 charrette, as it's called, in Port St. Lucie earlier this year, and hoping to get more specifics on 750, I attended the meeting in West Palm Beach. I heard about the Chamber of Commerce and the 6 pillars. I heard about sustainable communities. I endured their self-serving scenarios about the certainties of sea level rising and other climate changes supposedly caused by mankind. It was related to me that there was a gentleman who asked the question of one of the presenters at this conference. The question was asked, are there any scenarios that don't show a sea level rise? And what I was told was the guy got a deer in the headlight look, and in fact, he had never considered that there was a no sea level rise scenario. And moving on, I listened to the glories of transit-oriented development as they were expounded upon. And just an aside, ask yourselves if you would have preferred to walk, bicycle, or ride public transit to this meeting, or if you want your children and grandchildren to have to, because there are no other options. Those are serious things. If the 750 goes through, that's what you're facing. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you that public rail transit, which 750 advocates big time, which is a proposed solution to a non-existent problem, has already been determined to have worse results than existing private transportation. Data from no less than the U.S. Department of Transportation National Transit Database, the U.S. Department of Energy Transportation Data Book, and the Energy Information Administration shows, among other things, that rail transit uses more energy than the average passenger car per passenger. There is not one passenger rail system in the United States that operates at a profit. Cost analysis shows per mile public transportation is 5 to 9 times more expensive than private means. Rail transit will not work in our county due to location of the existing rail facilities. I could say more, but I'm going to summarize my experience with the 750 conference. I came away with a lot more questions than I had answers. I came away with more generalities than I had specifics. And I came away with a sense that layers of bureaucracy will smother property rights as well as free market initiative. In conclusion, I want to tell you, and I look everyone in the eye, I have nothing against planning. Nothing at all. Planning is absolutely necessary, and I've already lauded you for the planning you folks have been doing in regard to solid waste, and I meant that sincerely. But from my perspective, I see unresponsive third-party planners. They are not disinterested citizen voters, and they are not elected to office. I see stakeholders who are in reality just special interest groups. Combined, they claim to be the arbiters of the best use of resources and the best use of property and private property as well as public property. My stinkometer was pegged as I left at the end of my second day there. And in closing, I'm a practical person. This process and the planning that it leads to is known as regionalism. Practical interests necessitate the following questions which demand answers before any meaningful action. Where has this been tried? Was it successful in benefiting the citizens according to their values and needs? Who makes the investment? Who realizes the return on the investment? And lastly, what is the rate of return in tangible assets that benefit all citizens, not just special interest groups? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mucklow.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mucklow, before you go, Mr. Mucklow, hey, I just wanted to, you gave us some numbers there. In the calculation for passenger mile on the individual, does that include the cost of highways, the billions of dollars in highways? Because I want to make sure I understand that that's accurate. That
as far as I know that it does, but I'd be glad to get back with you at a further time.
Please do. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, my name is John Moeller, and I live in 5217 Northwest Iredell Street in Port St. Lucie. And I thought I'd be the only one here that went to that conference for West Palm Beach for 3 days. And I went there to find out about it because I'd been to the same thing in Port St. Lucie, and I wanted to find out more about it. I wanted to hear what they had to say. I asked them a lot of questions. I also spoke with the other group, the American Coalition for Property Rights group. I wanted to hear both sides. I'm here to say that one thing I found out was that in the goal for this plan, they want 40% of the people in the future to live in 50 years in an inner city community with mass transit, 40%. The American Coalition for Property Rights told me some figures about the Realtors Association of America survey that was done. I looked it up because I want to know, I have the facts, and I brought them with me. I have It's on page 16 and 17 of that survey. If you go on the internet, you can find it. It states that only 8% of the people in the United States actually want to live like that. 80% of the people in the United States want to live in a single-family detached home. In St. Lucie County, there's no one living like that there at all now because none of this has been built. Which to me tells me in the future, if you had something like 400,000 people living in St. Lucie County, you're going to have to convince 160,000 of them to move into an inner city community with no private transportation. That flies in the face of all the logic of what I'm finding out to where people really, really want to live. 8% say that that's where they want to live. 80% say they want a private home. The other 12%, they're rural, live in trailers or on condominiums like over at the beach. The reason why people want their private homes is for both security and protection. That is what's also stated in this report when they asked 87% of those who do live in private homes why they did it, because for the security and protection of having their own private home. I mean, if the guy's house burns down next door to yours probably won't, but if you live in an apartment, if his goes, you go. People don't want to live necessarily like that. When I tried to find out how it was that they were going to pay for this, I had to connect the dots on that because I asked them some questions. And basically what they're going to end up doing is they're going to rob from Peter to pay Paul. And they're going to come to you and they're going to hand out all kinds of money, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in grants from places like HUD, Department of Transportation, the EPA, Department of Energy, and they're going to wave all this money in front of you and say, all you got to do is sign here and we're good to go, and we're going to... And the word they kept using to convince people to do this was the word steering. We're going to steer people in that direction. I think that word should have been changed to force, because that's the impression I got from them, is that they're going to use higher taxes, they're going to use regulation, they're going to use rezoning, eminent domain if everything else fails, to steer people in the direction that they want them to go. When I was here 2 weeks ago, I told you I'd spoken to about 100 people. That number now is about 150 people. When I talked to them about this, and I explained to them, have you ever heard of it? So far, I haven't found one single person outside of, let's say, planners or somebody here that's even ever heard of this program. Most of the times I get the impression they're outraged by the fact that this is going to be implemented without their knowledge or their input into this program at all. What I basically understand from the people in my neighborhood and the people I'm talking to is that if this plan goes through, that this county government is going to be both planning the next 50 years and governing against the will of the people, because the vast majority, overwhelming majority, want to live in their own single-family detached homes and do not want to live in an inner-city community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Folks, if you don't mind, try and control our applause for these events. Appreciate it. Good evening.
Hello. My name is Peter Bullock. I live at 3120 North Highway A1A in Fort Pierce. I'm very proud to live in St. Lucie County, and I'm a property owner and a taxpayer. This is my first attendance at your meetings, and I have to tell you that 750 made me do it. I oppose the 750 plan. I personally consider it a cancer on local government. That it's the worst thing that I think the citizens of the United States have faced since the founding of the country. I think the thing that troubles me most about the 750 plan is the very obvious threat to my freedom to choose how and choose where I am going to live, or more likely, the freedom of my children and my grandchildren to choose. I know that I'm a product of an earlier generation, earlier than many of you, and I grew up with the American dream. But I don't believe that dream is lost, and I'm here to convince you that dreams are part of the human makeup. To act upon dreams, we must be free to choose. In the broadest scheme of things, this becomes a choice between individual freedom or slavery. To the extent that we lose our individual freedom to choose, we become slaves to someone or slaves to something. 750 wants to institute urban land boundaries. Those boundaries will then determine whose individual property will receive services in the urban areas and which properties will not receive services, which are outside the boundaries of the urban areas or defined as the rural areas. Follow the money. Federal dollars will flow to urban areas at the expense of rural areas. But personally, I like living in St. Lucie County with its suburban flavor. I don't want to live in a place that looks like or feels like Miami or Fort Lauderdale or even Palm Beach. Federal dollars will require federal standards, such things as narrower streets, homes constructed without garages, eventually odometer taxes, things that nudge people out of their cars. But I like my car. Federal standards will require more moves to smaller square foot residences, stack and packs. But actually, I personally prefer urban sprawl. 750 will build a train running from Orlando to Miami, but no passenger train in the United States operates without government subsidy of some sort. Can you tell me how much that little toy is going to cost me as Mr. Taxpayer? 750 won't even address that cost issue. Federal standards will nudge everyone out of their cars and into walk-bike villages. I have spinal arthritis, and it's painful for me to walk any distance, and I don't bike. How is 750 planning for my lifestyle? Did I say I love my car? Planners appear to like the 750 plan, but I believe that when the majority of St. Lucie County citizens understand the true ramifications of the 750 plan, they will not like the consequences. Thank you very much for my opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for public comment. I appreciate it. My name is Phyllis Fry. I live at 275 Date Palm Road in Indian River County. I've just returned from a 3-day summit at Palm Beach Convention Center where the focus was on 750's plan for Florida's housing and transportation. It's been 6 months since Indian River County voted to withdraw from 750 because once the public understands what this really is, they don't want it. We had an overwhelming number of people in our county who said, this is not an American idea. As chairperson for the American Coalition for Property Rights, our members have attended all of the 750 meetings since December of 2012 in order to study their ongoing policies and plans. As you may recall, 750's mission statement as presented at the very first design charrette in Indian River County was, quote, to effect extreme changes in housing and transportation by bringing millions of passengers by rail from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, and Orlando to use your parks and beaches. That mission has not changed. Their slogan remains regionalism, one neighborhood at a time, and their mission still is to control 7 counties within 50 years. I foresee that it will be much sooner. Under a required tax-based sharing arrangement, cities participating in 750 will share the burden of cost for other areas. For example, Sebastian or Fellsmere would be asked to contribute to the bailout of Tri-Rail or other losing entities in the areas to the south. If Fort Pierce wanted to develop its harbor, 750 bureaucrats in Miami would have the right to deny them that right. In other words, there'll be no more county lines and no more control by locally elected officials under the mega-region 750 plan. Under the tax-based sharing agreement, private homes will be taxed in the extreme to pay for the inner cities, a massive distribution of wealth. Federal funding would be granted under smart growth policies and EPA regulations. Under increased regulations by the EPA, private homes with their individually controlled air conditioners and their wasteful irrigated lawns will be deemed unsustainable. Automobiles with their dirty carbon footprints will not be allowed, but that's okay, because we will all be living in sustainable communities adjacent to mass transit where the government will take care of all our needs. Bear in mind that he who holds the upper hand on the money will make the decisions about how this money will be spent. Working under the President's Council on Sustainable Communities and Smart Growth Policies, these housing and transportation projects are federal mandates. These include, but not limited to, the rezoning of our communities under mixed use, using eminent domain wherever necessary, traffic control, building heights, population placement, and the redesigning and closure of our streets to restrict the use of automobiles are components of 750. Narrowing the streets using DOT grants is the first phase. The transition from the optional to mandatory occurs in increments. Transportation will be required by foot, bicycle, or mass transit. This arrangement is being called Complete Streets, where the government will ultimately provide you with all your needs within walking distance. And yet, community services surveys show that only 1 to 2% of the public could be urged to use public transit over the private use of their own automobiles. You did ask a question about the rail, all aboard Florida, and I do have those figures. Mr. Busher, who's the executive director for 750, cannot implement his Sustainable Communities plan without a rail system to link these sustainable communities all the way from Miami to Orlando. And he likes to tout All Aboard Florida as being a private enterprise. And yet, as of March 15, 2013, Karen Hedlund, Deputy Administrator of the Federal Railroad Administration, confirmed that All Aboard Florida has applied for a $1.5 billion government loan. This will add one more tax-funded payer rail system in Florida that will not operate at a profit, for a total of 3 in Florida. Not one rail system, passenger rail system, operates at a profit in America, which begs the question, why would we insist on creating a loss on investment plan by replicating what we already have? Amtrak incurred the greatest debt to taxpayers when it was approved for a $563 million loan and has been hemorrhaging money ever since. I can give this to you, to your secretary, if you'd like to review these.
Provided the clerk here.
These figures right here.
The clerk right here. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fry. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Austin. I'm a co-founding member of American Coalition for Property Rights, and I'm proud that our group is joined with many fine people from St. Lucie County.
Your address, Stephanie?
6250 Arrowhead Lane, Vero Beach. I'm sure everyone in here who is not in our group is wondering, what is 750? And in a nutshell, I will tell you, it is the profound reorientation of all humanity. And it is starting in our nation right now, in every state. It is also global. I first learned about regionalism when I was studying the origins of the smart meter deployment. Quite by accident, I came across many articles and videos about unelected bureaucrats that had already divided our nation into regions and mega-regions. I found that this nefarious plan was global to local. I was stunned and dropped the whole issue, thinking it was some kind of silly conspiracy. I picked it up again when I heard about the charrette that was planned in Indian River County, and that charrette was not well received. Like others here, a major observation of mine at last month's 750 summit, and it was their third summit of the year, very wasteful in my opinion, was that the sheer lack of public knowledge and participation was just evident. There were, however, many present there that were obligated by their employers to attend. If there was any press coverage, none of us knew about it. The overwhelming feeling was that we felt that the 750 planners really didn't want the public to know about it, and they didn't care what we thought. The public was politely dismissed by the use of one word, misinformation. This was meant to marginalize and ridicule us as they discussed the agenda item of what to do about rising opposition. I assure you that we are anything but misinformed. I suspect that all of their plans will be speeding up behind closed doors now that the truth is out in many circles. We will be watching. 750 has nothing to do with the environment and everything to do about control. Everyone in this room can see the web that is being built around us, and I'm talking about the spying and all the rest of it. It comes in the form of extreme land use regulation, high-speed rail, stack and pack housing, transit villages, redistribution of wealth, social engineering, social justice, land grabs, just to name a few. And by the way, Common Core education in our schools is also a part of this plan. I strongly urge you to go to trusted websites, and I have a list of trusted websites for you to look at, and including one that we have started right here in this county. In 1838, Abraham Lincoln said, "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedom, it will be because we destroyed ourselves." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oops. Please. Okay. Good evening.
Howdy. Bear with me, I'm not a public speaker.
Oh, no problem. Just name and address for the record to start off.
Name's Matthew Renson, 2833 Southeast Peru Street, Port St. Lucie. We elected all of you to protect our life, liberty, and property. Those three ideas are part of our Constitution, our philosophy of government. You are now considering supporting a group of people, a non-elected group, who are pushing the plan called 750. 750 stands for 7 counties, 50 years. This insane plan will, in effect, negate the reason we elected you. This plan will turn over the decisions of zoning, taxes, to a small bunch of imperious, ideological, pompous socialists who will do nothing more than... lost my place. Yeah, well, they do nothing more than make you a rubber stamp, okay? We, the people, will not need you. In fact, we will not need a BOCC at all. So why would you vote yourselves, in more ways than one, out of a job? There are so many things wrong with this plan in practicality, philosophy, morality, that I have a hard time picking a starting point. The plan wants to move businesses and other people close together along a narrow strip that would require people to take trains and trolley cars to and from places of work. We will have high-rise buildings where all people of all walks of life will live. This will include those who have not earned their way into a higher standard of living, will be forced to pay for it through higher taxes. The 750 planners say they will not force people to move or uproot their businesses, and indeed we believe them. They will not do it by force. They will do it through coercion, through high taxes, zoning, and eminent domain for environmental concerns. Driving a car will be expensive. They'll make it that way. The plan wants us to walk or ride bikes to work in the hot Florida sun. Want to work next to a sweaty, smelly coworker? We'll pass this plan. It really stinks. If you know anything about history, you will know that people moved away from crowded cities for a good reason. They wanted open space and a place to raise their families without crime and prostitution. Wherever and whenever this has been tried, it has failed. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society built such high-rise structures which quickly became run down and full of crime. these structures were eventually torn down. It did not work. If you think middle class and rich people are going to purchase condominiums with high percentage of poor people living right next door, you're out of your minds. It's not going to work. They're not going to do it. It will not work. I believe it's been tried, but it didn't work. Much of the argument for 750 is the idea that we will drown. And this is another, because I was at this thing in West Palm Beach, and they were pushing CO2 levels and 6 feet of water, rising seas and all that. But I have to tell you, over the last 15 years, the sea level has only risen about 60 millimeters. That's 2 1/3 inches. That's nothing. And there are good reasons for that, but I'll tell you, CO2 is not one of them, okay? We now know that the sun is the entire cause of global climate change. It has nothing to do with CO2. Absolutely nothing. You're being duped into believing that to be true. The whole point is that 750 plan will give you all kinds of reasons to follow them to save the planet. These reasons are designed to lead you down the primrose path of reality, of really bad legislation, and to foist an unsustainable system on the population. The real goal is redistribution of wealth. Okay. Let me get on here. 750s will tell us that we are doing everything that is unsustainable. If I had a young lady at the conference tell me that business profits were unsustainable, if I had a chance to ask, I would have asked what you replace profits with. Losses? These are the kinds of people that we are dealing with. They are the kind of people who say capitalism is evil, unsustainable, and that we need to redistribute wealth. They will take control of our property, our resources, and our cars. Don't get duped. See them for what they are. And then I can go into funding. U.S. government, where do they get the money for it in the first place? They got it from us. We are being bribed with our own money. We are $17 trillion in debt and taxes collected.
Mr. Renson?
Yes?
Time has come up.
No. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. I could go on forever.
No, it's good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Renson.
About 200 behind you.
Wow.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mary Burton. I'm a resident of St. Lucie County. I reside at 5209 Silver Oak Drive in Fort Pierce. I'm here about 750, and for everyone in this room, make sure you look it up. Your life may depend on it. Everyone has pretty much said all the things you can say about 750. I might want to be able to bring it home a little because I found some information regarding St. Lucie County that someone gave to me, and it was about a vehicle miles traveled based impact fee. Now, this was a study, I guess, posted by St. Lucie County in August 9th of 2010. This will give everyone an idea about 750 and what it means to you personally. Now, this vehicle miles traveled based impact fee is called a VMT based road fee. That means that you will be taxed depending on where you live to the urban area. St. Lucie County has a map up on the site, I believe, that the urban area has been determined. Is that correct? I saw a map with a dotted line, and it was the urban area. I apologize. Due to my bad eyesight, I could not determine where the western boundary of the urban area lies. Would any of the commissioners know where that western boundary for the urban area has been determined? Do you know?
It follows quite a line near 95. But
near 95.
Yeah, most of the counties have that urban growth boundary line.
So what that would mean, if you lived west of I-95, you would be charged at a different rate than the people who lived inside the urban area. And this county commission, maybe not if you weren't here in 2010, the commission goals were lowest fees consistent with adequate service, simplicity, support urban growth strategy, And underneath that, it said all road improvements will be directed to urban area needs reflected in the LRTP. Needs outside of the urban service area would have no public funding. So I want you all to be aware that people outside of the urban areas, their taxes will go up between 35.6% and 45.2%. And yet, no public funding will come back to your area for road improvements or services or things like that. These were the examples off of St. Lucie County website.
Mr. Chairman, I got to stop you. Ms. Burton,
Yes.
That's just not true. And the reason why a VMT has been presented as an idea, thank you. The reason why it was presented as an idea was so that when we're dealing with the cost of building roads and so on and so forth at $1 million a mile, if we're going to do this, it's going to cost everybody else that much more to support building roads outside of the urban service boundary. So this has to do with development as it comes, not if you're already there. This is a way to try and keep the people who have bought, paid for, and paid taxes in this community from having to pay more for development. It's a way of making development pay for itself.
Well, the reason I thought that, and I'm not an expert. I'm trying to do as much research as I can
And that's good.
to help myself to be informed. But I went by this little, I even wrote it down because I thought it was significant. And on the website, it said single-family residence. The area, now this was probably from a county that's already done this as an example. That's where I'm using it from the website. It said urban areas in 2005 paid $9,015. In 2009, they paid $4,002. The percent change was a minus 55.6%. In rural area 1, $9,015, the same tax in 2005. In 2009, it was $12,226, a difference of 35.6%.
And that is because the infrastructure that has already been paid for and built is what is servicing the urban area.
It did not designate.
Well, that's the reason. So,
Mr. Chairman, perhaps it should just be mentioned.
Hey, sir.
I was attempting to elucidate the matter. An impact fee is something that is paid as a one-time fee, which is paid when a dwelling or a building is built. It's not an ongoing tax. There was never anything like that considered.
Well, even with the 750, as we've seen, and we've been to these conferences, we've been to these meetings, we've been to the workshops, they are going to manipulate the population with fees. The further you live from services, the more it's going to cost you. I mean, that's just how, you can't have everyone who is impoverished, who lives in a certain area. Where would you support the area? You're going to need to get the fees from somewhere. All I'm saying is, as I'm looking at this, I think that we need to think about what is happening with 750. 750 will take control away from the people and away from our elected officials. Right now, we have a voice. We have a voice with our county commission, and we can get up here and speak. You have a voice with your city councils. 750 replaces your voice. It overrides your voice. It silences your voice. So look it up. Let you find out about 750. My only other question to you today is, in 750, when do you have to sign an agreement that will be in 750 or not into 750? Is there a timeline?
you want to answer it?
The 750 plan is not a mandate by the county to be a part. There's nothing that mandates that the county sign it or agree to it from that standpoint. And that's probably why some of the confusion has also come up at times, because there's nothing that's been provided to the county that says we have to do this or else. It is a plan that the regional planning councils are obviously creating and developing at this point in time. And I appreciate my colleagues' interest in getting involved in dialogue back and forth, but we want to be respectful as well to the audience and allow you to provide your comments. If at the end board members have comments, we'll want to do that, but we want to try and make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak. We actually used to only have 3 minutes of public comment. We've increased it to 5 now. try and make sure we do it, and that's why we appreciate your comments, Ms. Burton, as well, keeping that going.
When you get a plan from 750, when they're done construing a plan, I don't know how it works since there is no plan. When they bring it to you, who decides? Do we get to know what is in the plan before you get to accept it?
The plans that are provided, the DOT and other agencies often develop plans all the time. And those plans that are provided, and we're able to look and review those just as anybody is able to from the public. So you'll be able to review that plan. And that's something that will be provided as they move forward towards the conclusion of their plan later this fall.
Will we be able to bring up a consent agenda for you to vote out 750 like Indian River County?
The county has the opportunity to make any action that they would want, so yes.
So when, is there a time frame? I mean,
There's been no time frame. There's been nothing provided to the county. In fact, as you probably are aware, most of the county, staff and commissioners have not been party to many of the activities that have been going on.
Yes, we noticed that there were no St. Lucie County commissioners at the summit. Who gets to sign if we agree?
Mary, I appreciate this. Again, without going back and forth, this is a time for public comment.
Okay.
And so we want to do that.
Thank you.
Feel free to contact my office or any of the commissioners' offices afterwards, and we'd be filled.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Glenn Collins, 195 Serenata Court. First of all, I'm appalled that she was interrupted with her comments. I thought this was general public comment. And this is, I watched the meetings a lot of times, and I've never seen a commissioner interrupt anybody. And I'm here to speak about 750 also. I don't have any notes or anything, but I'm just speaking from what I know about. There's been a lot of assumptions made, but bottom line is 750 is going to take control out of the county commission. So we're talking about taking control out of the five of y'all. So a thing like, there's a hearing about a cemetery today. A thing like 750 is going to take control out of y'all deciding that, because when 750 comes along, y'all may not be able to decide that, I'm all for rail. I think we should have rail. I think I should be able to take a rail down to Miami because I'm a young person. A lot of people said earlier, or one gentleman at least said, I'm an older generation. Well, I am the younger generation. And I would like to take a rail to Miami. I think one thing that the county should be doing and that the state should be doing is public transportation. You guys want to subsidize public art and all these other things. I think transportation would be one thing that you should be doing. But, everything else is taken about public control and federal government deciding what we should be doing in St. Lucie County. And that's not the way to be going. I mean, Indian River County is already out, so I think we should follow suit. The other thing is people mentioned is redistribution of wealth, and I think that this is a big thing. What this is all about, it's about deciding where people are going to be put and just taking away of the American dream. And we really need to think about this. I mean, the people that are deciding this are they went to land. They got a degree in land planning from, some so-called elite university, but these are not everyday people. America is all about trial and error and deciding what we want to do with our lives, and just taken away from that is not what this country is all about. So. I'm not going to sit here and repeat everything what everybody else said, and there's plenty of other things I could talk about, but bottom line is I think that we should get out of 750 and, the county commission decide what is best for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Mowry, commission members, Ms. Outlaw. My name is Roland O'Brien, 21 Villa del Norte in Fort Pierce. I've spoken on this subject before. Like the others before me this evening, I'm also here to talk, and I'll keep mine relatively brief, also about 750. And I titled it Regional Control isn't regional. The nice thing about local government is that citizen voters can control it, as we vote for the commission, your city council members, state government. But the 750 people that are going to run the program, when it happens, if it happens, are not elected. If citizens don't like their local government today, simply re-elect someone else to serve them better. Now try asking your neighbors, who serves on the board of your regional commission? And I've been to the Regional Planning Commission, listened to a gentleman that's far out and have no idea how he ever got that position. Anyway, regionalism is an unelected and unaccountable form of government, dilutes the power people have over government and the decision-making process. The U.S. Constitution guarantees each state a Republican form of government, which means sovereignty rests with the people and their representatives. Regional government lacks these checks and balances because regional commissions are, in essence, appointed by an operation of law, not by voters. Most of the appointed members, or I should say many of the appointed members to these regional planning commissions, like the 750 group, have agendas of their own. They are landowners, they are in the planning business, and always watch for someone's hidden agenda. The rise of regionalism, like what we get from 750, comprises another layer of government between the local city, county governments, and state government. All we need is one more layer of government. The new layer of bureaucracy diminishes the local control and authority of city and county governments for self-government through home rule. Local control is further buttressed by the founders' belief that government closest to the people governs best. Creating a regional tax base or regional equity is a form of central planning. The problems created in one county are paid for by taxpayers from another county. The last time I was up in front of this group, I talked about the southern counties having a lot more people. When they need water, when they need land, where do you think they're going to come to get it? St. Lucie County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Good evening.
My name is Linda Otteson. I live at 1450 Southwest Salini Avenue in Port St. Lucie. The question was asked earlier by one of the previous speakers. Who has seen this succeed? I have not seen it succeed, and I have seen it fail dramatically. When we talk about the banlieue of Paris, France, I was there. I saw the buildings go up, the nice little communities of tall high-rises with their fountains and their beautification programs, very close to the underground, buses, trains, and I saw them tear them down. I lived in France for almost 25 years. I have also lived through the regionalization. My beloved Limousin, where I lived for a number of years after I moved down from Paris, has been joined into another group, another area, which formerly was a series of departments in Auvergne. And quite frankly, it has been disaster after disaster. One of the major problems with great government planning was quite evident to everyone in the world for the fleeting amount of time that was a 2-week period. In 1998, the country of France lost 15,000 of its citizens because the almighty government and its wonderful health care program had built retirement homes that were supposed to be the epitome. Only problem was there was a heat wave, and 15,000 people died in the high-rises and in the retirement homes because there was no air conditioning. And since it is a custom in France, where everything is managed, that most people take their vacations in July and August, when the heat wave happened, there were not enough medical personnel. Everybody was on vacation. I almost lost a very, very old and dear friend during that period of time, but my husband and I went to the home and took care of her because there was no one else to do it. When you get into bureaucracy after bureaucracy after bureaucracy, and socialism to the extent that everyone is taken care of and it's all for free, all you're doing is complicating life and taking us farther and farther away from where we started as a country that believed in life, liberty, and property. And that property is something we work for, we earn, it is ours, and it is ours to do with as we see fit, just as our lives are. Life is our life. It is our life to live as we so choose, not that it is necessary to be lived by someone else exactly the same, which is what all of this 750 is about. It is about Agenda 21 intruding into our lives and putting all of us in, I think someone said, stack and pack. Well, I've been there, I've seen it, and I've seen the massive failure. I have seen the riots. I have seen the destruction within a 5-year period of time of a magnificent high-rise because it didn't work. People do not like to live in cocoon shells, Americans particularly. We're not used to being pushed around, and we won't stand for it. Patrick Henry spoke in the Virginia House of Burgesses. We all know the last line, give me liberty and give me death. But do remember the first lines that he spoke. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. This war has begun. It started with Agenda 21, and many things that have been forced down our throats must stop. Please, give me liberty or give me death.
Thank you, Ms. Otteson. Good evening, Rhett.
Hi, I'm Rhett Lloyd from 1518 North Longwood Circle here in Fort Pierce. I wanted to talk about one of the issues of 750 that has so far gone unmentioned, and that is the ideas of new urbanism. New urbanism is an ideological component of a book called Suburban Nation, The Rise and Sprawl and Decline of the American Dream by Andres Duaney. Andres Duaney is a lead consultant for the group 750. He is also known as the godfather of new urbanism. What new urbanism is the idea is that we should have communities where people are, it has to be walkable, it has to be high density, and it discourages drivability, wide lanes where people can drive and pass one another. And he pretty much looks at towns and communities like ours with disdain and disgust. He holds the way we live with a contempt. In his book, throughout it, he actually calls the automobile a psychopathic tool. In the book, he continues to go on to see how they are going to enforce their ideas upon the rest of us. And this has been done one time in a voluntary manner, and that is the town of Seaside, Florida, which has been privately developed. People were privately adding stakes into it. It was not forced upon a community. It was not forced upon a county. People entered into it by their own merits. What 750 is the idea that through government regulation,
that the new urbanists can eliminate choice for the rest of us. And they want to eliminate the choice of how we can live. They want to enforce regulations, laws, and legislation that will force people to live into high-density areas by making such things as taxes, impact fees, and living in suburbia pretty much null and void for many people who are not wealthy like Mr. Andres Duaney. I don't imagine when everyone's forced to live into the city center that he's going to want to be there with the rest of us. Mr. Duaney goes on at a recent Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to talk about the merits of how something like 750 may be imposed upon people, and it will be imposed upon us. One of the things that he said, and I quote, and this is public record from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council Committee, "We're much more efficient down here than Orlando is. Orlando is a big corporate, actually quasi-fascist operation. And fascism, you can say what you like, but it's efficient. And that's what we're running down there. We don't have that here. We have a bunch of little squabbling towns all the way down," and he's talking about South Florida, from Indian River County all the way to Monroe. But through 750, new urbanists like Andres Duaney and others can force us to live how they want to by eliminating choice. And so 750, no matter if you agree that it should be walkable or we should have rail, it's all about choice or the lack thereof. Through 750, they are going to impose upon us how we can live and how our children can live and our grandchildren can live throughout the next 50 years. One of the other things that Mr. Duaney said about the black swan of 750, and if you don't know what black swan is, it's something you can't predict that will wreak havoc.
Just want to try to make sure you stay up here focus-wise. We also have the camera for the audience.
It's just for the audience, so it's all right. Thank you very much. So, as I was saying...
For protocol purposes, we try and make sure that people are addressing us instead of the audience. I know you appreciate that.
All right, so as I was saying, Todd, okay, so one of the things that he said in his last meeting was that in regards to how they would force people to live, was that, you know, through fascism he can tie it all together. One of the other big points is the black swan, which I was talking about before I was interrupted. I lost my train of thought. I apologize. The black swan, which they cannot handle, is economic competition. One of the things about 750 is it supposedly or allegedly is supposed to be a plan for sustained prosperity. How can you sustain prosperity without economic competition? This plan is flawed from the get. The way that standard of living increases for people here is that through competition, products and the quality of services increase and prices decline. This 750 so-called plan or scheme flies in the face of economic law. What we're going to be done is be imposed upon how we can live, and they want to eliminate competition, which is not possible. What will happen is that we'll have unintended consequences that we usually get from legislation, which will drive people away from the areas and make such things that people cannot live here because the cost of living or cost of rents are too high, that people are forced out of the area, and this is wrong. If you want to learn more, you can go to stop750.com, or you can search 750 and property rights on the area, because 750 also says nothing for property rights. And if you don't own property, you don't own yourself, and you're a subject to somebody else. And so I urge you all to learn more about 750, because a lot of the things like incentives, smart growth, and comprehensive planning, at face value, they sound great. They sound great at face value, and they're benevolent sounding, and they should. That's the only way they're going to force it upon the rest of us, is do it while our eyes are closed and people are asleep at the wheel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board this evening for public comments? Good evening, Mr. Munt.
Good evening, Chairman Mowry, Commissioners. For the record, Craig Munt. I'll give you an address in a minute, but I'd like to start with, if you remember a program that was Monty Python's Flying Circus, they would say, "And now for something completely different." I'm chairman of the Arts and Cultural Alliance for St. Lucie, and I'm here to speak to you this evening. Currently, our offices are in the Schreiber Center down at Indian River State College and the St. Lucie West property. We have just put out a news release, and I wanted to take advantage of your SLC TV to get the word out a bit further, and hopefully we'll get some response from this. But the Arts and Cultural Alliance of St. Lucie, Inc. announces the creation of a new Community Advisory Committee for St. Lucie's Art in Public Places program. Now, the purpose of the committee is to act in the public interest on matters relating to the public art program, planning, selection, and maintenance of the works of art. And the works of art that we have are some 18 that are arts works that have been taken by the county, and then there are 6 pieces of artwork that belong to the city of Fort Pierce. The Arts Alliance will administer the AIP program with the participation of the advisory committee, and it is our plan to form the committee over the next 60 days so that we can complete a maintenance analysis, a public artwork inventory, and a needs assessment. On May 3rd, 2013, ordinance number 11-016 was reinstated, allowing for future county capital improvement projects to include an allocation for public artwork. And the public arts program is to strengthen the positive reputation of the community, enhance the civic environment, and enrich the lives and citizens of visitors. By focusing on the development of the arts and cultural activities, that is the goal of the St. Lucie, or the Arts and Cultural Alliance of St. Lucie. We will be looking for artists, art organizations, persons interested in art, community leaders, and civic leaders as well. So anyone who's interested, please get in touch with us. The offices are listed. We have a website, and you can call either myself or our director, who is Richard Gable. As I was making some notes this afternoon to speak to this, I thought I'd just address you on a couple more points, if I may. I'd like to give you a grant report. We have 16 outstanding applications for grants in the amount of $137,000. But to give you an idea what happens on grants these days, and you know it's difficult because of the county applications for grants. It's not dried up, but it's certainly more difficult. I thought I'd give you a couple examples. A $14,500 grant that we asked for, we got $3,325. Another grant that we asked for $45,000, we received $8,992. So that's the environment that we're operating within today. So what we are doing is we're focusing and we are expanding the organizations beyond St. Lucie County, the Treasure Coast, and the state of Florida, and are now going to larger foundations such as Kellogg, Gates, Johnson, and Smithsonian in our applications for future funding. A couple other things that we're doing. I'd like to tell you about an art summit that we will be hosting. That'll be on September the 20th at the Sunrise Theater. We have 5 pages of invitees, and it's being not hosted, but sponsored by Harbor Community Bank. And that day there'll be a lot of conversation about art in St. Lucie County. The last thing that I'd like to tell you about is the educational workshops that we are planning now, and this is for 2013-2014. And we will have events such as a public art discussion, and this would be importance to the community and setting goals for public art. We will be hosting business and financial records for the arts community and how to manage that as a small business. We'll have a seminar on grant writing for artists. We'll have a seminar on public relations. We'll have a website and social media seminar for these people so that they can use those for their furtherance.
Mr. Munt, we're going to need to
Yes, sir.
Call you up.
I'll give you 30 seconds. I know where I've been there. IRSC partnerships, we'll be doing those. and then we'll be having a seminar on how to locate and prepare for juried shows. So those are some of the things coming up. I just thought I'd like to bring you up to date. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Appreciate it. Good evening, Mr. Arena.
Hello, Commissioner Maury. John Arena, Fort Pierce. I am gratified for the modifications to the 13 artificial islands near the Fort Pierce Marina. However, the planting of red mangroves is still in the plan. They will totally obscure our open space view of our one-of-a-kind lagoon. No one wants them. They were simply an early idea, which is now seen as too much. I have been trying to sit down with the project manager to offer up alternatives, so far without success. Several weeks ago, I was riding my bicycle on A1A near South Jetty when I decided to go up a new driveway ramp. It had a 2-inch rise from the street level. For part of the rise, some temporary asphalt formed a mini ramp. Since I was riding my mountain bike, I continued toward the ramp where there was no temporary mini ramp. That 2-inch rise grabbed my front wheel, turned it to the right, and the next thing I knew, I was on my way down to the street. I have an 8-inch scrape on my leg to show for it. The contractor should complete things instead of doing things part way. I'm sure he's being paid well to do so. 80 years ago, the United States needed more people, so benefits and tax breaks for married couples with children made good sense. Today, considering our pollution problems and traffic snarls, we now have enough people. A lot of gay people want to get married in part to enjoy those benefits. Also, the 3 million plus legal immigration quota should be reduced by 1 million or 2 until we have clean water and clean air. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Anyone else wishing to address the board this evening? Seeing no movement, we will close general public comment. Just as a note here, I hope you all can understand that we try and run a good, clean meeting. We want to make sure that the public has the right to be able to speak and to speak freely. Obviously, depending upon the subject, you may get a commissioner to feel excited about a topic, which isn't bad, because obviously they can see your passion as well, and we appreciate that. The one thing that we do try and ask, though, is that people respect us as well in the position that we have, and that's all we ask. If we come into your home and you say, take off your shoes, I may not like it, but I realize that that may be something you want. And here we try and run a nice, good, clean, professional meeting, and as a result, I realize there's some people blurting things out from the audience at times or saying comments, and I think a lot of it was because of the passion that they were already feeling about the topic they were speaking on. With that being said, we have several other public hearings tonight as well, and we ask that everybody just try and respect each other, work through that, so that we can accomplish the goals that you would obviously want us to accomplish, but to know that we're doing it in an orderly manner that at least people feel that it was done respectfully. So thank you for your comments tonight. We appreciate that. Any other comments from the board members? Seeing none, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any item board member wishes to have pulled for individual vote or discussion at this time? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. It's been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. With that, we will turn. I'm going to actually have item 9 of our regular agenda pulled up. This is item A, the Planning and Development Services, to the beginning, so we'll put that in front of the public hearing. So staff, is there... Mark? Want to cover that one so that we can finish that and move forward?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Satterley, Planning and Development Services Director. We had a request by the FDOT via Land Design South to have the board consider the eminent domain waiver process for several projects on which the DOT is working. They got a little out in front of providing information to the affected property owners, and so we've asked and received a letter from Land Design South, wanting to push this off to a meeting in the future so that the DOT can go out and meet with the residents, discuss the projects, and discuss, the eminent domain waivers. And so they should be in contact with those residents, scheduling meetings, and then we will bring that request back to you all, when it's appropriate, probably within a month or two. So that's where we are on that item.
Okay. All right, so we're going to take no action at this point.
Correct.
Do we need a motion to move it?
Do you want to
date
postpone
certain?
that, or we actually don't even?
I would just request that it be postponed. I don't think we have a date certain.
Date certain?
I don't believe we do. I know the DOT is eager, but I think they also recognize the need to, drop back and, talk to the residents and make sure people understand what it is that's going on.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the DOT has actually scheduled 3 public discussions, if you will, here in the chambers, starting, the 18th, or I'm sorry, the 17th?
I believe the first one is
for the
July the
Midway
17th.
Road.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the Indrio and Okeechobee are after that.
And I think those are towards the end of the month, so that would mean that the item might come back to you in August or possibly even early September, but I know it won't be long after those meetings are held. But I want to ensure that, we provide, information to people so they understand what that process entails.
Do you just want to pull the item now, or do you want to actually postpone?
Yes, we'll postpone it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to postpone this.
I'll second it.
Postponing it, date certain, no date?
No date certain. No date.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion?
I would just ask, will it be re-advertised, right? So if anybody wanted to have an opinion about this, they could come back at another time.
Yeah, correct. And we did field a large number of calls. Leslie Olson spent a good deal of time on the phone trying to, tell people what was going on and what we were doing here. But because the letters had been sent out, we left the item on the agenda in case people came to the meeting, wanting further information. So.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. That I meant to have James Moses, as a part of the consent agenda, added as my appointment to the Historical Commission, retroactive to July the 1st. He's continuing on. I have a motion to that.
Move approval.
Motion.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. With that, let's turn to our public hearings for this evening. That staff will begin with the County Attorney's Office. This is item 8A, ordinance amending Chapter 1-9, abandoned property, garbage, trash, junk, and debris. Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant County Attorney Catherine Barbieri will be handling this item.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, as stated for the record, Assistant County Attorney Catherine Barbieri. What we have before you is an ordinance that's amending our abandoned property registration ordinance. It has previously been passed. The ordinance was by the Commissioners. The only change that we are asking that the Commissioners make tonight is that the sunset provision, we are asking that you extend the ordinance till January 1st, 2016. This is a tool that code enforcement uses. If you have a mortgage holder that is foreclosing on the property, they have to register with the county, and we're able to use that registration then to contact them if there's any problems, and it has been an effective tool, so we're asking that it be extended till January 1st, 2016. The permission to advertise was previously granted by the board on June 4th. The ad was run in the paper in compliance with the rules, and at this time staff is recommending that the board adopt the ordinance.
Any questions for staff? This is a public hearing. This time we'll open for general public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board this time on this item, please feel free to do so. Seeing no movement, we'll close general public comment. We'll return to the board.
Mr. Chairman, move approval as recommended.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. With that, we'll turn to item B, Planning and Development Services. With that, we'll turn to staff. Good evening, Ms. Waite.
Good evening, Chairman Mowry, Commission members. For the record, Diane Waite, Senior Planner, presenting staff comments for the next two items. The first is a request for a change in zoning from the AR1 zoning district to an institutional zoning district. The second item is a conditional use permit for a cemetery in the institutional zoning district. Although these two items will require a separate vote, they will be presented and discussed simultaneously. Both items are quasi-judicial hearings. The map on your screen represents the responses from property owners within 500 feet of the subject parcel that have indicated their support or opposition for the proposed cemetery, which will be allowed under the conditional use. With the conditional use applications, a conditional use form is mailed to the property owners within 500 feet of the property, along with the required public notice. The purpose of this is for determining whether or not a 4/5 vote of the board will be required for approval of the conditional use. If owners of 50% or more of the area within 500 feet provide a written protest, a 4/5 vote is required. To date, staff has received 11 responses from those opposed to the petition and 2 in favor. We also have received 2 neighborhood petitions in opposition of the proposed cemetery, which contain 22 individual people. 4 of those signatures are owners of property within 500 feet of the subject parcel, which did not submit a conditional use form. Therefore, their votes are also counted in determining whether or not a 4/5 vote is required. Written opposition has been received from a total owners of 9.39 acres within 500 feet. This represents 28.64% of the land area. Therefore, a 4/5 vote is not required. The subject parcel is 4.7 acres located on the west side of Christensen Road, approximately 100 feet south of Midway Road, located a half a mile west of South 25th Street. On June 20th, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval of both applications. At that meeting, 6 residents addressed the board regarding concerns and questions about the impact and operation of the cemetery. In addition, a large number of members of the nonprofit group also appeared to show support. On June 27th, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting for all property owners within 500 feet, which were contacted by mail. Staff attended the meeting along with 6 residents. Mr. Mitchell with Yates Funeral Home also attended the meeting to address questions related to the residents' concerns. Staff believes that the meeting was very helpful and addressed many of the outstanding questions. Since the planning and zoning meeting, staff has added 1 additional condition to the draft resolution. And that condition would prohibit any other use on the property once a cemetery is established, unless it was brought to and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. The subject property is currently undeveloped and wooded. The existing uses surrounding the subject parcel include the Florida Center for Recovery to the west and south, single-family residential homes to the east, and vacant residential zone parcels to the north along Midway Road. The future land use designations surrounding the parcel are public facilities to the west and south, residential suburban to the north, and residential urban to the east. The zoning districts surrounding the parcel are institutional is being requested to the west and south, AR1 to the north, and RS4 on the single-family home parcels to the east. To the southeast is a parcel with a designation of PUD that was approved for the Ravinia development, a single-family housing development that has since expired. This is a view of the parcel from the corner of Christensen Road and Daniels Road. The parcel is fairly heavily wooded with slash pines and laurel oaks, cabbage palms, and understory. As part of the conditional use application, the applicant did provide a conceptual site plan that shows a 25-foot buffer consisting of the retention of the existing trees and understory. In addition, the county's code will require a barrier of at least 6 foot high that forms a continuous screen between the institutional uses and residential uses. Staff has recommended several conditions as part of the draft resolution, including requirement for an administrative minor site plan approval prior to establishment of the cemetery. In conclusion, staff has found that the proposed change in zoning is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive and is in compliance with the Land Development Code standards of review. With the proposed conditions of approval and the approval of the change in zoning, we have also determined the proposed conditional use permit meets the standards of review. In conclusion, staff recommends that both petitions be approved. We would ask that following Commission's actions on the change in zoning, that the hearing be closed and the hearing be open for the conditional use permit for public comments and final action on that item. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them.
Any questions for staff? This is a public hearing. By the way, this is a quasi-judicial item. Need to make sure if there are any disclosures at this time. Need the commissioners to please provide that at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I have spoke with staff. I have spoken with the applicant, and I have either received emails and or text messages in regards to this from several different people.
Mr. Chairman, I too have spoken with staff, the applicant, and his representative as well.
Mr. Chairman, I just speak with staff, also the applicant and the attorney for the applicant as well.
I too have spoken with the applicant and the representative. And for the record, all of the documents, emails, and correspondence are in the current record.
Thank you. I, too, have spoken with the applicant as well as with staff and had emails that were provided. Thank you. With that, we're going to turn to the public. This is a general public hearing. With that, good evening, Mr. Curry.
Good evening, Chairman Mowry, members of the Commission. For the record, Brad Curry with Land Design South, representing the applicant Adele Nefzi and the Baraka Center, and request before you tonight for a rezoning to institutional with conditional use for a cemetery. Staff did an excellent job presenting. I do have a few items I want to touch on, but I'll make it as quickly as possible since staff did cover most of the things that I wanted to go over. Again, the request is two things. The change in zoning from AR1 to institutional and a conditional use for the cemetery. Subject property, again, staff went over this fairly well, south of Midway Road, between 25th and Selvets. Zoom in of the property, you can see that it's heavily wooded, and access for the property would be off of Christensen Road. Zoning of the property is RS, I'm sorry, land use of the property is RS, and the with public facilities to the south and to the west. Zoning is AR1 with institutional to the south and to the west, some commercial office across the street, really institutional in that general area. Residential suburban is the land use category. A maximum of 2 dwelling units per acre is allowed, and so that would be a total of 9 to be built on the property. This is your zoning and land use compatibility chart. I know it's a little bit difficult to read, but it says within the RS zoning district, I'm sorry, land use district, here's the zoning districts that could be allowed. So that's the list. As you can see, institutional is one of those. I think it's important to note that commercial neighborhood and commercial office are also on there. So this property could be rezoned to a commercial district, and it would be compatible with your comprehensive plan. Here's the proposed site plan for the project. Again, the access is off of Christensen Road. There is 2 phases, and I'm sorry I didn't show it on here, but we would the cemetery is expected to bury up to 2 to 3 people per year. And so to build out this facility will take a number of years. So the intent is that the phase 1 would be cleared, the burial plots would be laid out, people would start being buried there, and then that the phase 2 would really stay pretty much like it is today until they went in for a clearing permit for that. So the phase 2 portion of this could be could remain just as it is today for many, many years. I'm sorry, I wanted to point out the buffer. I feel like I've talked with everyone about it, so I tend to miss some things. The 25-foot buffer around the perimeter is something that we're proposing. The site does have native habitat on it, mature oaks, mature pines, and mature palms, and we are going to maintain all of those within the first 25 feet of the property, go in and clear out the exotics. And so from day one, there will be a mature native landscape buffer surrounding the property, and there is a tree mitigation requirement at the county that says for every tree you cut down, you have to either pay or mitigate on site. And with the trees around the perimeter, we've already done the analysis, and we do meet the tree mitigation requirement. This area does have quite a bit of institutional and non-residential uses in it. Vacant institutional there, Liberty Baptist Church, Castle Foundation Hospice, the Florida Center for Recovery, and then various church, Midway Road, Church of Christ there to the east, Girardi Brothers, construction buildings, office buildings, and then an office parcel across the street, vacant, and then PNRD. So this map shows an overall layout of this section, and I call it the institutional commercial cluster, but it just shows that the rezone of this property to institutional would really be in keeping with the character of the area. It's really not out of the ordinary. Cemeteries, oftentimes the board, I was at a meeting this morning or this afternoon at the city, and they were asking, where is this use allowed by right? Where can we do this without having to get a conditional use? And institutional zoning districts are the only zoning districts that allow cemeteries. And even in that, they are required to be a conditional use. So regardless of where I would be in the county, if I wanted to do a cemetery, I would be here before you guys for any other property that's in the county. It requires this public hearing process, so there's nothing out of the ordinary. This is upside down. I don't know if you guys can, it's not upside down. The picture was taken upside down. I corrected it so you can see the actual name. At the at the P&Z meeting, there was discussions about, what do these graves look like? What are your headstones going to be? And this is what's being done currently by the BOCC Center up at Hillcrest, the cemetery where they are burying their people to now. It's a flat placard, and they don't expect to have anything above. If there is anything above, it would be a vase to hold flowers. That would be what would be proposed above, and that would be only as a, if the person wanted that as part of their burial. My client was recently at a funeral up there at Hillcrest, and he took some pictures. I guess he probably looked a little bit weird taking pictures at a funeral, but you can see on that the concrete vault is what they call it, is in the right-hand side, and then you can see the backhoe bringing in the top to that vault. The bodies, once they have passed, are taken to the funeral home. They are wrapped in sheets, and then they are placed in this concrete vault. The concrete vault, the top is put on it, and then the dirt is put on top of that. There is never an instance of dirt touching the actual sheet or touching the actual property. That's a watertight container. It has dirt on top of it. And there was some talk about the water table. I did a little bit of research. This property is near the White City Cemetery, and the groundwater is similar to White City. And my reports have been I forget the gentleman that we spoke to, one of the funeral homes, does most of the proceedings there at White City, and said he's never had an instance of anything floating up or anything like that at White City, and White City is actually lower than this facility. So we don't expect that to be a problem due to the water table. But I will tell you that the water table is an issue in every cemetery in the state of Florida, is what their person at, I believe it was Halsey Funeral Home, told us. So this gives you an idea. These are new pictures. We did not have these pictures at the time of P&Z last time. Also, we did have a neighborhood meeting on June 27th, and several homeowners attended. And I was unable to make the meeting, but from speaking with staff and from speaking with my client, it appeared that the people who were at that meeting, the residents that did come, the neighbors that did come, when they left that meeting, they were in favor, or more in favor of the project. They seemed to be satisfied with the overall of what they were told at that neighborhood meeting. In summary, I think that the cemeteries are probably the least intensive land use. I think you guys have heard me say this now a couple of times. If anything, I have a hard time finding anything that's less intensive in the zoning code and the land development code. Again, we're proposing to maintain the native habitat around the perimeter of the property. I really consider it more like a park-like setting. I can imagine looking through the native landscaping, native habitat, and then going into the nice grass mowed area behind. The landscape areas that are there, they'll be professionally maintained. The grass will be cut. The buffer will be maintained. It's not going to be overgrown with exotics. Really little to no traffic associated with this project. Again, 2 to 3 burials a year. There will be a gated access to this that will be closed. We talked about hours of operation, but we would like for it to probably be closed from dawn to dusk, that sort of thing. Or from dusk to dawn, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. So that people aren't going in there at night. There's really no lights associated with it, so it's not going to put off anything that would harm the neighbors. No dust associated with it. No persons allowed on there. Really no noise unless there's something crazy going on over there. And I think there's been some discussion in the news about the burial of that the Muslims can't be buried with non-Muslims, and I just want to put that to rest a little bit before continuing on or before finishing my presentation. This is more of a community. The BOCC Center is a community, and if a Muslim man married a non-Muslim woman and she wanted to be buried next to her husband, she would be able to be buried in this facility. It's more of a community. It's not Muslim, non-Muslim. It's and if their kids were there, they could be buried there. But it's a community. I think the newspaper is saying that they want to be segregated. I think those are the terms that they want to use, and that's not really the intent. It's more about the community, of the BOCC Center. The request for conditional use is consistent with Section 110700 of the St. Lucie County LDRs. And the rezoning is consistent with 110600 of the St. Lucie County LDRs. We have staff recommendation of approval, and we have unanimous approval from the Planning and Zoning Board on 6-0 on June 20, 2013. So with that, I respectfully request that you approve this request, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Any questions at this point for the applicant from Commission?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Curry, 2 things. If you can go back to one picture of your design of the entryway. This is really not appropriate for a rezoning question, really, but I just want to get it out there before we have public comment, because I think you'll answer the question for many. First of all, I want to say thank you for addressing the water table issue. As you know, that I have a concern about water tables and drainage and so on and so forth. So that's always something I ask questions about, also with drainage of the entire property and how that'll be handled. In this photograph, in this depiction, if you will, your roadway comes in, and one of the concerns I think I probably have heard from the public is view of sight. You've got 60-foot of roadway across the street where any actual homes are, and then you've got another 25-foot native buffer. If you look to the road as the entryway comes in, you have a clearing on what would be the south side of that road. Would it be appropriate and probably more aesthetically pleasing if you meandered that road in and you maintained and left some of the trees so that that road would be tree lined, so that then the people living across the street would not have direct view into, and it would just simply occlude any of the plots and so on and so forth? It would add additional privacy and would give some comfort to the neighbors across the street. Would that be something your client would consider?
Yes, sir. I mean, Commissioner Zadowski, yes, sir. I mean, the site plan is just a concept to show you guys generally what we're thinking. The entrance can be moved, and it can be come into where it adds a little bit of an angle to keep it to where it's not such a straight shot. You did bring up something that I forgot to mention in my presentation, and that was at the P&Z meeting, the health was brought up. The state code has a requirement that says that public wells have to be 100 feet away from cemeteries, or private wells have to be 75 feet away from cemeteries. I spoke with the gentleman at the state, and he said typically that's for new wells. So if a contractor comes in for a new well, then he has to be located with at least 75 feet away from cemeteries or 100 feet away for a public well. And in this way, we're going backwards. We've already got the wells, and we're making sure that we aren't infringing on anybody's property. So, but I can tell you that the 75-foot is the rule that we would have to follow. And as you stated, there is a 60-foot right-of-way for Christensen Road. I don't have a mouse, and my mouse is not. If you look here, Christensen Road is a 60-foot right-of-way. So from the edge of this gentleman's property to the edge of our property is going to be 60 feet. And then in addition, we were proposing a 25-foot buffer from here to here. So when you add those two numbers together, you come up with 85 feet. So even if there was a well in these people's front yards, and our neighbors' front yards across the street, we would still be more than 75 feet away from their private wells. And so there shouldn't be any impact on their well water. And I will also say that 75 feet and 100 feet isn't just for cemeteries. It's for any kind of potential...
septic tanks, maybe? Septic
tanks would be a great example. I mean, they use farming and cattle, and I mean, it was about 100 different things in that email that I saw that could be a point of pollution. I'm not sure if that's the correct term that they use, but it wasn't that they singled out cemetery for the 75 or 100. A cemetery was one of the things that you have to make sure that you are separated from. So.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. That was my next question, but from that, I'm okay for now until you...
Well, and actually, Mr. Curry, I think based upon other discussions, the roadway, as you're showing in the site plan, clearly may actually become further to the south as it connects in the driveway going into the property. So it's not even perhaps going to be where you're showing it now.
That's correct, Chairman Mallory. I mean, it's a concept, and when we originally proposed this, we were trying to get it as far to the north as possible. We've recently received the news that the county is going to be building that road, and so the actual access point of that could go anywhere along Christensen Road. So that's correct.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
I'd like to ask a question, Mr. Chair. How many funeral services have they had on the average per year or per month?
2 to 3 per year is what they're averaging today. And I believe there is a gentleman that the funeral home that they use is here, and he could come up and discuss and just talk about the practice, how the bodies are handled, and just how he's worked with them in the past. So that might be a better question for him as well. But I've been told it's 2 to 3 per year is what we're looking at.
And so the way they're going to do business is relative to the same fashion that they do at Hillcrest currently now. Is that correct?
It's exactly the same, yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the board at this time, please feel free to do so. Just provide your name and address. Good evening.
Good evening. Adel Nefzi, Director of Chemistry and Drug Discovery at Torrey Pines Institute for Molecular Studies. So I'm the applicant, and I invited the Director of the funeral homes that we work with, Mr. Paul Mitchell. If you have any question, means on the way how we do the burial, we will maintain doing the same thing. We have been working with him for many years, and we will continue to work with them. So if you have any question, I invited him for you, so please feel free to ask him any question. Thank you. Paul?
Good evening.
Chairman of the board, my name is Steve Traylor. I live at 5040 Christensen Road in Fort Pierce, basically right across from the driveway that they're depicting here. And I kind of prepared a statement. The last meeting I attended on this issue, the one at the Islamic Center, besides the one at the Islamic Center, was with the Planning and Zoning meeting held on the 20th day of June. I was there as an angry resident that was being duped by someone who was hoping to sweep through a zoning change before the homeowners and residents even realized what was happening. I thank my wife for paying more attention to our neighborhood and for taking the time to walk around the corner and down to the obscure sign someone had planted at the far end of the property line. I also thank her for taking the time to walk the neighborhood and meet with the residents and homeowners. Most of them had no idea what was going on. The notice they received from planning, most threw away because it looked like another piece of junk mail. Now, some want us to believe that Mr. Curry had no malice when he placed that sign and had done so as a hurried thing. As a resident, I believe different. The main property line lies on Christensen Road, as does the sign advertising the property for sale. Midway Road is a very busy road and has one lane in each direction. It also has a speed of 45 miles per hour. Mr. Curry would have us believe that he stopped his vehicle on the side of this busy road and hurriedly erected this sign so that motorists racing by at 45 miles per hour could have the opportunity to see and read it. Or that residents slowing down to navigate the turn would be able to do the same. Mr. Curry, I'm sorry, but when things affect the lives, the peace, and the serenity of a neighborhood, no one should hurriedly do things. They should do things carefully and make sure that they are done righteously. No one would look at the placement of that sign and say it belonged anywhere but on Christensen Road, next to the real estate sign. This, I believe, is a lesson for the Planning and Zoning Board also, that they can learn. When it was brought to their attention that a meeting with the residents had not been done and the opportunity by both parties to slow down and work this out and answer the multitude of valid questions, they decided instead to rush it on through or pass the buck to the county commissioners. Since then, we have discovered that a lot of our questions and fears were dead on, no pun intended. It is hard to trust government when government doesn't trust you. Someone thought that this cemetery would not go over good with the residents, and they were hoping to push it through without a lot of fanfare. The idea of a cemetery right smack in our neighborhood did not sound good. Who wants to be reminded of death every morning as they rise? At the Planning and Zoning meeting, the issues brought by the residents were summarily ignored by the board. The issue of who will maintain the cemetery when it is full. They said there will be a 25-foot buffer around the property. How will the buffer zone be maintained? They said it would be serene, peaceful, and kept beautiful. They also said that they must bury their departed the same as all cemeteries. They said that they will not build any structures on the property without the Board of County Commissioners for approval. And they said traffic won't be as bad as they only have 2 burials a year. That said, I offer my rebuttal. When you have a majority of the neighbors affected by a plan veto it, then it should not pass. If it does, it tells them you don't care about their neighborhood. All of those who live in this neighborhood said no. One member of the Planning and Zoning suggested it be postponed for a month until the concerns of the residents could be heard and answered. The petitioner's agent said they could do it. And then Planning and Zoning implied that residents don't count by passing it. No one ever saw an actual site plan. We don't know if the driveway will be paved or if there will be a sign. They said there would be a 25-foot buffer. 25 feet is not much if a storm, bug, or fire rages through and destroys the buffer. How long will they take to rebuild it? A 10-foot high barrier wall or even a 6-foot high, I've heard that mentioned, will give the appearance of a prison wall or worse, become a graffiti wall. As for how will they bury their dead, we discovered at the meeting that they're talking about when the representative from Yates Funeral Home was there over at the Islamic Center, that they have the right to bury without a casket or a vault. Legally, they can lay them directly in the ground. They have said they will use the vault, although state law does not require it. There is no guarantee that the remains of their loved ones won't end up in our drinking water because the vaults are not waterproof. I guess they know how many will die this year, as they have promised us they will not be busy, therefore traffic would be minimal. They told us they will not build any structures on the property without the approval of the county commissioners. However, once the cemetery is approved, the commissioners' hands may be legally tied. What does this come down to? It comes down to this: never underestimate how much someone cares about the things that affect their neighborhood. As for the cemetery, We had a chance to meet with the group that wants to put it in our neighborhood. In 20 minutes, we had more questions answered than 2 hours at the planning meeting. What we discovered was that we are all humans and that religious or politics does not have to separate us, but that it can actually bring us together. That we don't always have to agree as long as we agree to be civil. As for the cemetery, I can only speak for myself. I still would rather it be somewhere else, because even in the interest of working with our Islamic and Muslim neighbors, a cemetery just does not belong in our neighborhood. However, this commission decides to ignore the residents and approve this plan. We must insist that our water be protected, that our view is protected with no signs on Christensen Road, that the buffer is maintained continuously, and that a plan is in place for the care and maintenance of the property long after capacity has reached. Also, that they will not construct on this or any other property surrounding the cemetery that they may have or acquire in the future. Any structure of any kind, regardless of its purpose, and that it be made part of the conditional use. We maintain that our neighborhood has stood the test of time, and although the planning and zoning has designated our neighborhood an institutional zone and has plundered it in the interest of progress, we reserve the right to protect our homes and families. We must insist on the conditions as we have stated them. Most they have already agreed to, and with adherence we may all live in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, is it Christensen or Christendom?
Christensen.
Christensen is your name. Thank
No,
you.
my name is Steve Trailer.
Trailer. I'm sorry. I wrote down something different. So I thought I heard Christendom, but no, the street is Christensen. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Trailer.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Trailer, before you go, how long have you owned your house?
I don't own my house.
Oh, okay.
I lease my house from the property owner, and he's actually asked us to represent him. You know, I hear a lot of people say, well, the residents, just because we don't own the property, that it's like we're not paying our dues. Well, I don't know an owner yet, and I've been a homeowner in the past, that didn't pass on the costs of that property to the people that rent it. So maybe I'm not paying directly on the tax rolls, but I'm paying the taxes on that place as well as anybody else does, and I think my voice should just be as heard the same, whether I'm a taxpayer or a leaser.
But I was going to, who actually does own the house?
It's, boy, I went mental block on me. Larry Hopkins is the owner.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask staff a question. As part of Mr. Taylor's presentation, he indicated that he wanted us to consider some kind of an opportunity to put restraints on any future property that may be purchased. Are we allowed to do that at this type of a situation? I mean, if this is the property we're looking at, can we look at different properties around there and put constraints on something that may happen in the future?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mark Satterley, I think that would be extraordinarily difficult. I think they would, if they were to come in and expand this or try to do a different use, I mean, we'd have to, consider each one of those on their own merits. But I don't think we can presuppose how we would restrict property in the future that's not even under consideration for tonight.
And there would be other public notices, there'd be public meetings, there would be those types of things if anything like that would happen. Okay.
Correct.
We have a legal description for the lot that's being provided for this, and then we have the rezoning application as well as we have the conditional use permit request. So we have two separate items of which we can add conditions to the conditional use permit. So those items, there are certain items that you could deal with in a conditional use permit specifically tied to this parcel that's being requested from that standpoint. The site plan issues and those other items that would actually come at a later time. Although there are some items, Mr. Sadler, that you may want to bring up to the Commission's light just as it relates to the wall that I think is currently required. I don't know how the residents are feeling about even that particular request. And I'm not sure what waiver opportunities or things you would either want to do or consider as a part of the conditional use permit. But with that, you can give some thought to that aspect if you want, but it's one that you still have a public comment portion going on. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Shirley Lindstadt, and I reside at 3263 Daniel Street, which in the slideshow when they showed the picture of the vegetation of the property. That's basically my front yard. I apologize to some of the petitioners that have put things in. I have not made previous meetings because I'm only 2 weeks out of a full knee replacement. But I am here tonight in my post-operative state only because I feel very strongly about how this has developed. Number one, in the beginning of this meeting, there was a list of items given that have already transpired, and I just want to give some clarification to some of those items. The Zoning and Boarding Commission did pass this unanimously, and then there was a list of a number given of people who responded via the mailings that came out. I just want to clarify that those mailings that went out had a due date to respond to, and that due date had already transpired by the time many of us had gotten that. That was admitted to by the person running that zoning and boarding meeting as well. So to say that out loud here is a little bit misleading. I think there are a lot more people that are in opposition that just simply felt that they had missed the deadline to be able to respond to it. I am a 20-year resident, 20-plus year resident in that neighborhood. My parents live right down the street. We've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. I'm the type of person, I'm very busy. I'm a single mother. I'm a full-time professional. And I don't pay a lot of attention to the smaller things, which are probably to my demise. But going to the sign that was alluded to by the gentleman, and if I may ask, could we possibly go to the aerial view of the property that gives a red outline of the, would you be able to help me with that, Mr. Curry?
Number 11, slide 11.
The placement of the sign was at the most obscure. Well, let me backtrack just a second. Because I am a busy person, as many of us all here are, and I'm not trying to excuse it, but I'm trying to preface it a little bit. I don't pay attention to all the little details. I do a lot more listening than I do talking. In everything that I've listened to and everything that I've evaluated since all this has started and come to my attention, I'm a person who breaks it down into right and wrong. You know, I'm not going to sit here. I try not to judge people. I try to live the way I try to treat people the way I would want people to treat me. So I look at the facts. Number one, the placement of the sign was, you'll see here, this right here was where the placement of the sign was. All of these people right here are the ones that are affected for it. So essentially it was placed at the farthest point of the property, which, again, that in and of itself, I'm not going to place any judgment on. However, then add to that there were no efforts made prior to the zoning commission meeting to have any type of open forum with the residents, being that we've been there the longest, you know, to maybe come together and try to resolve some of the issues that could come of this. Strike two. Now I'm starting to lend into this to the port, you know, where I'm starting to become a little suspicious that maybe we're just going to be steamrolled here. The third then was when that mailing did go out. It went out just days before the meeting, but then there was a printed date on there, due date, that gave us no time, because by the time it came to us through the mail, that due date for response had already transpired. And again, that was admitted to by the person that was running the zoning. So now I've got 3 strikes. I think I'm pretty prudent when I say that. I feel as though, as a resident there, that we're being steamrolled. I personally don't have any objections to a cemetery, because there's right ways of handling things and wrong ways, and I think that they could probably make that work, the people that want this change enacted. My biggest concern about the entire thing is the placement of the entrance to this on Christensen Road. It is a small neighborhood. It is a U that goes from one end of Midway back to the other. There are the potential for small children, there are families, there are pets. The increased traffic gives me pause, because right now, without the cemetery and whatever traffic that would bring, there is a traffic problem developing. It's hard to get out on a Midway Road in the mornings to go to work because of the heavy traffic on Midway Road. I would ask that we table this, reposition that entrance, and come to an agreement mutually as people who have existed there and people who want to come in and share that space with us, and table it until we can draw up different plans that maybe make everybody a little bit happy. And as a 25-year resident there, I hope that my voice is not silenced.
No.
Thank you.
And actually, just as a reminder on this, they're not actually seeking site plan approval at this point, so that will be following anything that would take place should the board decide to approve the rezoning request and the conditional use approval. They would actually then have to come back, work with staff, and go through the site plan approval process. So there's
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm not up on all of the laws. I'm busy being a parent and being a contributor to this community. But it's just like with the facility that is now in there, that is the rezoned institutional, the drug rehab facility. That started out years ago as an Alzheimer's facility, and we didn't give a lot of fight when that came through for approval. And in the interim, it's turned into a drug rehab where now I've got guys that are jumping those walls, that are walking our neighborhoods, that I'm having to, and I'm a local law enforcement officer, so I'm dealing with those types of things. And of course, when it happens, all my neighbors are calling us. So that's how things happen, and that's how things slip through the cracks. And basically, that's where my fear was, that there were things happening here that were subversive, and I didn't want things slipping through the cracks again.
Thank you.
Ms. Lindstedt, whenever I asked Mr. Curry about the entryway, were you in the room at the time?
I was, but again, I don't know when it's time for me to speak, or so that wasn't clear. I apologize.
What I was asking was, because this isn't a site plan review, but we can put conditions if this is approved from a zoning standpoint, conditional use comes later, we could encourage the applicant through conditions to create a meandering driveway or some other condition in which full sight into the facility would be different, where you would maintain a tree-lined opportunity so that you really wouldn't just see in. Is that something that's acceptable in trying to find a solution?
My apprehensions are not a fear of seeing in. I don't mind, I alluded to the fact that there's right ways and wrong ways that this can be done, and I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that people are going to do their best to make this something that can be harmonious for everybody. My concern is that the entrances on Christensen, which is going to additionally labor an already belabored neighborhood with traffic, why can it not be an entrance directly onto Midway Road, and then just have that privacy buffer between the neighborhood and the actual cemetery itself? And that can't be developed. If this gets approved as it is, then my fear is that won't ever be an option.
I guess I need to ask, and I don't expect you to be a planning expert, because I don't think most of us are, and that's why we have professional staff. But from an intensity standpoint for traffic, there would not even have to be a traffic study done on this, I don't believe, because of the low intensity of traffic. It's been indicated that there would be possibly 2 funerals, even if there were 10 in a year. It wouldn't be as though it was a 7-Eleven or a school or even a physician's facility or something of that nature where patients would come and go to see their doctors. So those intensities would be much greater. So from an intensity standpoint, from traffic, I'm trying to understand where that traffic would come from your point of view.
Well, I think it's pretty amazing that we can guesstimate how many funerals we are going to have, but this is my train of thought on this, and I apologize if it's narrow-minded, but I am to understand that Muslim cemeteries are not in abundance. So what is to say that those numbers aren't going to increase once another opportunity has been made available to them? I've learned the hard way as a community, as a resident there, that once a door is opened, it doesn't matter anymore, what your opinion is, because once it's open, you lose control over the flow, the in and out flow. My concern with traffic is that those streets that we have, they've just recently gone from dirt to that recycled asphalt, okay? And just with the minimal traffic that we have with the residents, we're constantly dealing with potholes, things of that nature, and just wear and tear on the road itself. Increased traffic onto Christensen Road, and I'm going to anticipate and hypothesize that when there are funerals and we have a large exodus of vehicles, that they're not all going to go out left on Christensen, that they're going to, once they're wise to how the neighborhood is arranged, they're going to make that right and they're going to go through the other part so that they're not having to stand in lines of traffic. And when I say they, please understand I'm just talking about those individuals operating the cars. That is in no way meant to be disrespectful or hostile.
I will share with you that it's my understanding that the county has programmed that road to be redone.
Just Christensen, though, not the remainder of the neighborhood.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Satterley, would you mind just briefly discussing what happens with the site plan review process for those that are listening?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that would be a full review per the Land Development Code, looking at all aspects of the site, including, how the burial plots would be laid out, how the road would be laid out, the landscaping, whether or not there would be a wall or a fence. That is typically a requirement between a non-residential and a residential use. The applicant could request that that if it were the neighbor's request, they could waive the requirement for a wall or a fence. If the neighbors don't ascribe to that, then the board would have to provide that waiver. So those are all sorts of details of how the site would be laid out, where the entrance would end up being, all be part of that site plan process.
Is that a public process?
At that point, it's not. It's administrative approval. This is the public part of that process.
So in terms of residents being able to stay up to speed on what's actually happening with that, I just want to make sure that they know how to follow this process as it moves forward.
Yeah, and they can contact us, and there's certainly everything that is done is a public record, and we make it available at any time, and certainly we do outreach if people give us their name and phone numbers or emails, that when we have plans and things in the house, we reach out to people and make sure that they're aware of what's going on so that they can come in and take a look at it. They can meet with us, they can meet with the applicant, review the plans as they're going through the process.
Thank you. We're still under public comment. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Chairman Mowry and Commissioners, I'm Paul Mitchell. I'm co-owner of the Yates Funeral Home, 1101 South U.S. Highway 1 in Fort Pierce, and then also at 7951 Port St. Lucie. I reside at 2735 Southwest Glenmore Way in Palm City. The Yates Funeral Home, as you know, has been in existence for over 70 years, and they have served these families for many years. And Bill Yates, who has since retired, pretty much, and my partner and I purchased the funeral home 7 years ago. And carrying out the tradition that Bill has continued with these families, taking care of them, using the Hillcrest Cemetery, which is what we've been doing. And we just, this past week, had a burial on the day of the neighborhood meeting, actually. And this is a good friendship, relationship with these people, with the families, and it has been a very professional, dignified, and honoring their tradition, the way they take care of their families and burial. The gentleman before mentioned that the vault does not seal. The vault does seal. It is a watertight, airtight seal. So I just wanted to correct that comment that he made about that. I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have as far as the process, how it's handled, what from the beginning to the end, if you like.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mitchell, will you be handling the process at this particular cemetery?
Yes.
And if so, will you be providing the same services? For instance, it was stated, I believe earlier, that it doesn't have to follow state mandate, that they don't have to have the bodies in a vault and those types of things. Is that accurate?
Let me correct something there. First of all, the cemetery has rules as far as what they require. The gentleman said about just placing a body down into the earth. There are some green cemeteries that are becoming across the country right now. I don't know of any in Florida right now, but that is something that is maybe in the future. But right now, the cemetery requirements in all cemeteries, because of the way the land is, when the cemetery when it settles, it sinks. So that's why they require that vault or that outer burial container. So that's the purpose of that, and it is again, it's the requirement of the cemetery. So we follow the rules of the cemetery.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Zadowski, I think what you're trying to say, from what I've learned, is that it's the bylaws that each individual cemetery operation, if you will, makes up within themselves, if with their board of directors or if it's a private and so forth. And that's what constitutes the rules, if you will. It's not by state, it's not by county.
Correct.
It's by the actual organization, or however, whether it's a nonprofit or however it's being run.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Curry, though. My question would be, Mr. Curry, who would maintain this facility, and how would they maintain this facility?
The BOCC Center, for the record, Brad Curry, Land Design South. BOCC Center is a nonprofit organization that accepts donations, and they will be maintaining the cemetery and in control. They'll have a board of directors set up to maintain the cemetery. They'll develop the bylaws. And they just haven't gotten there yet. I mean, this is very early in the process, as I said in the P&Z meeting, but that is the overall intent, is to get the conditional use in the rezone and then close on the property and begin the process of setting up the business of this, and I say business, probably not the right term, the nonprofit part of the cemetery, which is the board of directors, the bylaws, all of those rules. Now, we would be willing to, as part of the conditional use, though, to state, and I think you could do this, to state that the bodies will be placed in a vault, which would give us a head start on starting our bylaws, because that would also be in the bylaws as well. They're already proposing that as part of the bylaws. We just don't have them tonight to give to you. So if there was a condition of approval that said the bodies had to be placed in a sealed concrete vault, then we would be okay with that, because that's what we're planning on doing. And then that would in turn just make it into the bylaws.
Mr. Chair, in my conversations and so forth, it is my understanding that the intent is to put several different things that I think many of the community and the board probably has concerns over within the bylaws. My problem with that particular item is the bylaws are after the fact of the rezoning and the conditional use. So in my conversation, I had asked if there would be any problem of adding any of those to the conditional use part of the hearing, and I was told no. So, I mean, I've got a list here going.
No, it wasn't a problem, or no,
No, they did. The ones that I discussed with them, that I had concerns that they would not be a problem, because they would be in the bylaws, because that was a huge point of contention with me as far as, which was coming first.
And why don't we wait until we get to our discussion portion before we do that? At this point, we're still under general public comment, so if there's anyone else wishing to address the board at this time, why don't we allow those individuals to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ursula Parrott. I live at 3180 Daniel Street. And let me start this off with thanking Mr. Nefzi for a nice meeting that he arranged. It answered quite a few questions that we had. And I just want to say, like my daughter said before me, it can be made workable to everybody's satisfaction if everybody sticks to their guns. And the question about the traffic that I have is, I know the funeral alone is not going to make that much of a difference, but since there are going to be houses built on the south side of Christensen Road is going to be widened, but I know the traffic will also go around our roads, and our roads can't handle it. We only get a Band-Aid every 7 to 10 years put on that, and that doesn't hold up. So I was really questioning, is it going to be done, is it possible that our roads can also be made traffic worthy or not? I don't know who to...
Are you talking about the PUD, in this graph here?
It's on
south, it's the where you see the windy, that's the PUD you're talking about where houses may be built? Is that what
Yeah, and there are also, since we are a horseshoe configuration, everybody and the way Midway is going to be done, I think we're only going to have a west exit on Christensen and an east exit, and only an east exit on Daniels. Well, no, it's West Virginia Drive. And Daniel Street is just a little connection straight in the back of it. So I know it's going to create a problem at one point, and I would like to have that addressed. And I think I don't know who can answer that, but those are my concerns.
Mr. Chairman, actually, from our staff standpoint, when that PUD was approved, and I don't know if you're going to have this answer unless you have it in your memory, but when that PUD was approved, were there conditions placed on that PUD that they had a contributing cost to prepping that road for the additional houses that would go in there, if you can remember?
I did work on that PUD, and I do recall that it required the paving of Christensen Road. It did not require the paving of Daniels or West Virginia, though.
Okay.
And unless we put a gate on the end of our road, it's going to be used.
Well, that's the answer we have right now, because I don't know that this applicant can be made to do 2 other segments of the road.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just to mention that, really, we are very pleased and impressed by the high level of discussion by the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Hi, my name's Stephen Harless. I live at 56.
Stephen, I'm sorry?
Road. Stephen Harless, Harless.
Great, thank you.
I wrote down what I want to say because this means a lot and I'll get emotional, so I had to write it down or I will get off topic. But first I want to bring up something that Shirley had mentioned earlier about our votes. When I first got this in the mail about how I proposed to vote on this, I received it June 6th, but it was supposed to be in May 19th. But I do keep copies of everything, and I have that here. I couldn't get it in a month prior to me receiving it, but I was definitely a very strong no on it, and I did get it in the exact same day that I got it. All right. As I mentioned, I live at 5060 Christensen Road. I'm here today to voice my very, very strong objection to the proposal of putting the cemetery across from my home. If you look on the maps here, I'm one of the properties that's directly across from the cemetery. I absolutely do not want a cemetery across from my home in no way, shape, or form. My family has owned and lived in our residential neighborhood for 42 years. I purchased my childhood home from my parents a few years back. I did this in part because this is a residential neighborhood. It is zoned residential agricultural. My baby girl will be raising a hog for FFA there, so she can show it at the swine show at a county fair. I do not want the property just I do not want just a few away from my property. I do not want the cemetery a few feet from my property, and I do not want the property rezoned. I look forward to having actual neighbors one day across the street from my house. I do not look forward to the depressing reminder of death every time I look out my window or walk into my front yard, or in other words, dozens of times a day, every day, from now on, if this is allowed. My biggest financial investment is my home. No one, let me say again, no one wants to live across from a cemetery. No wall, no hedge will take away the financial blow that my investment, my home, will take. Please do not allow the value of our homes and in this community to be degraded. And again, I remind you that some of us have lived in this neighborhood for over 40 years. My well where I get my water at. Where my family gets the water is located at the front northwest corner of my property. Standing at my well, I can flick a pebble and hit the property line of the proposed cemetery. The distance is approximately 3 car lengths, if you'd like to visualize this. What a morbid thought it is to drink a glass of my water, stand there and think about the dead bodies that are in the ground feet away. My children will be drinking this water every day. Would you let your child? At this time, city water is not available to me at my home. Even if it was, I cannot afford it, as I'm a single father of 4. This is one of the reasons I've not been to the other meetings. I'm just too busy running children everywhere. Yesterday, I was driving up Silvitz Road. I couldn't help but notice the property that's for sale there, and it's not residential. I continued to Edwards Road, where I passed the old location for the Fort Pierce Central High School, which I did it 10 years ago. In front of this property is a main highway. There's a canal on the other side. To the east is nothing but county complexes. To the rear is train tracks. And to the right, which would be the west, nothing but woods. No residents, no neighbors. I had to ask myself, why my neighborhood? With all the property available in St. Lucie County, why would someone do this to my family and my neighbors? My desire to live across from a cemetery, not to live across from a cemetery, is so strong that I would move if I could, but I cannot afford it. I cannot do so. It's not an option. What's going to happen to our neighborhood gopher turtle? So you know we have a gopher turtle that lives in those woods where they're putting a cemetery. I see this turtle every other day, and my kids look forward to seeing them. Will it be relocated? I have video footage of them. I guess on this issue, I'll be contacting the EPA to see what can be done about that. Let's see. I just want each one of you county commissioners to know that in this you're making a really important decision. And if you were to reverse the roles, what this does to my property investment, the fact that I have to drink water located just is disgusting to even think about it. You know, my septic tank's on the far side of the property. That's why I put the well on the side that I did. And fortunately, I couldn't see the future and see what was going to happen. I just want you to know that, you know, if the roles were reversed, I would never in a million years, to your family, to your investment, or to your neighborhood, do this. And I ask that you please, please, please vote no. The rezoning of the proposed property in question and to the permission of allowing a cemetery to be being built in this residential neighborhood. I thank you for your time and for your service and for being our commissioners. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Harless.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Harless, and thank you very much for your impassioned comments, because we do take every comment to heart, and we listen, and decisions that we make are not ever easy. These decisions are harder than others, especially when you're as impassioned as you are, and we appreciate your effort in raising your children in this community. 2 questions. One, were you in the room when we were being provided information from the Yates Funeral Home that any bodies would be placed in a vault which is watertight? Did you hear them talk about that?
I did hear that, and honestly, when you have to drink the water, I don't have a choice. I won't know if they're in vaults or if they're not. Just the thought of the bodies being over there every time I take a drink of water, it's just a morbid thought. You know, this is a residential neighborhood. I never, ever saw this happening. I've lived there since I was 2 years old. Moved away, had a home in another location, ended up moving back, buying this home. But
and I can appreciate that. And because we have to make a very difficult decision, I want to understand better. You know, you talked about where your septic tank is to your well. Is that a distance of 80 feet, 90 feet?
Above that.
Okay. Because it's been indicated that any wells, in this case, where they would provide any plots, would have to be at least 75 feet away from any other well. As indicated, the road is 60 feet, and there's a buffer of 25 feet.
Is that meaning after they widen it'll be 60 feet?
It's been indicated to me from staff that the distance
No.
is 60 feet of the road, or it's
No,
going to be, something to that effect.
Yeah, you must
Maybe it's
be
the
meaning
property line.
afterwards. Okay, I kept hearing you say that, like, and that's not 60 feet. From my well, I can literally go like that and hit the property with, like I said, with a coin.
Well, that's why I'm
That's how
asking these
close
questions,
it
so
is.
that the applicant can have say so and point out the facts for us, because it's important for us.
Definitely.
But then, if the road is, or the distance between properties is 60 feet, whether it's the actual road or the easements and so on and so forth, or where your well could be, and then the 25-foot easement. Were you here also when they showed a picture of Christensen? Is this picture consistent with what you see? Can you take it back to the... I don't remember which... It was the picture from Christensen Road. That's...
You see my house.
Is this accurate to say?
You see that yellow sign?
Yes.
Okay. Go past that, and you see the stop sign. The illusion of distance isn't really accurate in this photo at all.
Well, what I was asking for is this picture consistent with what is outside of your house?
Yeah.
Looking at... Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you.
By the way, Mr. Harless, do you happen to know how deep your well is?
I really don't. I could ask my dad, the one that drilled it.
100 feet? You know?
For some reason, 70 and 90.
That's probably right in that area.
It was either 70
to
or
100.
90, but I don't know exactly.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to address the board this evening at this time? Ron, you sit like you're a cat on a hot tin roof. Do you have a comment?
I do, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Just for the record, for Commissioner Zadowski, we have an existing 50-foot right-of-way at the project location. The applicant is proposing to dedicate 10 foot of additional right-of-way.
So the roadway right-of-way is 50 feet. They're going
Correct.
to donate another 10 feet.
That is correct.
Before the buffer.
Before the buffer, yes.
Then the buffer will
Then the
start,
buffer,
and
and the
it'll be another
25
feet.
That is correct.
Okay, I want to be accurate to
Yes.
make sure that his concerns were...
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, County Surveyor. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? Seeing no movement, we will close the general public hearing portion of this. We actually have these two public hearings for these two items. Am I understanding, do we want to have two separate hearings, or are we considering this as one?
Two separate hearings. You could vote on the rezoning first, close that, and then reopen the conditional use.
With that, we'll return to the board at this point. We're dealing with the rezoning issue. Comments from the board, as well as direction.
This is an interesting scenario based on all the information provided. And in a review of the standards of review, I believe that it is consistent with our current land codes and comprehensive plan. The effect on adjacent properties, I believe, will be minimum based on the presentations that will come in the conditional use, to which we can provide additional conditions. It is compatible with a number of institutional considerations in the neighborhood. I believe that reasonable steps will be taken through the conditional process to affect and to take into account the concerns of the neighborhood. And I believe that in its proposed use as a cemetery is in the least possible effect on the area, especially in the way of traffic from an intensity standpoint. With those reasons, I would motion to approve the zoning change.
We have a motion to approve the petition. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, with the understanding that the next process will be to address the conditions, I would second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none at this time, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. With that, we'll turn to the second item. Ms. Waite, I believe you provided all the comment. Anything you need to add in addition to that?
Yes, I would recommend that you add the offer by the applicant to add the condition related to requiring sealed vaults as part of the burials. One other condition that is not listed is we may want to add a condition that the 25-foot landscape buffer be provided.
Yes.
Our minimum by code is 15, so to ensure that we get the 25 feet, I would recommend adding that as well.
Two items that are added to that, and again, this is just
Chair.
for staff discussion at this time before we open the public hearing.
Okay.
So you
Well, I
wanna
just
open
had
it?
some others that I would like to add, at least for the board to consider adding on to it. So do you want to wait till afterwards or do it before the public?
If you want to mention those now before we open the public
Okay.
hearing to make sure those resonate.
Staff just mentioned the one on the sealed vaults. I would ask the board to consider, instead of putting the fence, normally we put that on the outside by the road to maintain the integrity of the landscape, the 25-foot buffer. I would ask that we consider requiring the fence behind that. So it's on the inside of the property, which still gives us security for both those on the out, but maintains that without the fence right in effect.
And just be aware that at this point, I believe the map is not up, but the only place that you would actually have the required wall would be on the east side, which is Christensen Road. Because of the existing zonings in place, there are no residentials to the north, west, or south. So you'd only have a wall on the east side if you did that.
I understand that, and that's the area I'm talking about.
Right, and then from that, I think we've heard from at least one of the residents that requested that not be put in because of the graffiti issue, and I think the applicant as well.
Okay, but again, it could be the ability to, we don't have to say that it has to be masonry. I mean, even if it was like a wrought iron.
But they're required to put a masonry wall in.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I just want to interrupt. We discovered this afternoon in my talking to staff that durable landscaping is also allowed. So that is something we're going to have to flesh out as to whether we're looking at masonry, wood, or landscaping.
Okay, it was my understanding that it was a wall regardless. Is that not the case?
It's an option for a fence or a wall.
Fence or a wall?
Yes, sir.
Or durable landscaping?
My understanding is, and ERD can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a combination of the fencing or a wall and landscaping. It's a dual requirement.
And Mr. Chair, while we're, Commissioner, did you have more? You had a
Yes,
list.
I did, but
Okay.
my biggest issue was to make sure that the fence, whatever it may be through the discussion, that the condition was that it was placed on the inside of that 25-foot buffer. The other one was, as I mentioned earlier, in my concerns with not having the bylaw documents prior to, I would ask that one of the conditions be that they would be allowed to use the flat ground markers. Thereby, we would not be allowing the above-ground mausoleums and/or the crypts and/or grave markers. And that if there are any vases that are used, that they be mounted. We had an issue during the last hurricanes in the White City Park, the White City Cemetery, that during the hurricanes, because of a lot of the stuff, the way it's set up, and people are allowed to leave there, that became flying missiles in the rains. So I want to avoid that happening again, is my reason. On the number 12, if I could just get the number 12 condition, you have on here required hearing, if there was any other use, it was a required hearing by the Board of County Commissioners. Was that intended to be a public hearing or just a hearing?
Yes, it would be a public hearing. It would be a major adjustment to the conditional use.
All right, could we add the word public just to specify that?
Yes, ma'am.
The one other issue that we had talked about was in regards to having a fence across wherever, a gate, if you will, wherever the driveway entry is, and that there would be posted hours of operation so that they could have it locked up at night. And once their bylaws are secured and made, if they would be handing those over to the county to include in the backup. It's very similar to what we do with homeowners' deeds.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Pardon?
Say that last one again.
Once their bylaw documents are complete, if those would be able to be turned over, a copy of them to the county and put in the file, very similar to what we do, what homeowner deed restrictions are done with.
Okay, so we have several items that have been suggested by Commissioner Hutchison at this point. Commissioner Zadowski?
Yes, you had indicated, and this is to Mr. Harless's concerns. First, the gopher tortoise. I don't know that that's been identified. It will be if you are going to do some clearing. You will have to, by law, handle that gopher tortoise properly. Are you aware of how that will happen, and is that your intent?
Yes, sir. Prior to a clearing permit, ERD is going to require us to do a gopher tortoise survey, and we have not done that yet. Again, trying to minimize the cost at this level, but prior to a clearing permit, they've already told us that we were going to have to do it. We are prepared to do it. My staff will be the ones that do that, so we are aware.
Okay, and then from a buffer standpoint, would your client be interested in adding additional buffer, probably another 5 feet? To make that, it would ultimately end up being 30 feet. So if you had the 50, it would be a complete 80 feet. It would reach the to a further extent of what you've stated that the state requires 75 feet from a well, and so on. That'll add an additional 5-foot buffer. So that would be my first request. But along that same thought, it's been indicated that a cemetery has a long life, and this will be a process over many years. And that you don't expect a lot of burials in each and every year. Would it, and again, this will come through in the site plan and how you determine how you're going to build this out in phases. I think to the Mr. Harless particularly, would it be something that your client would entertain in using the would be the western portion of the property and plotting first, so that it would be some time before the plots would be placed closer to the Christensen Road?
I mean, that's more of a difficult request because of the cost of building the road. You'd have to build the road all the way out to the west, and again, starting up, we would like to minimize the cost, which is that first section of road. So just from I haven't talked with them, and maybe they're okay with doing it, but just dealing with them through this entire process, the intent of the first phase was to try to build as least of a road as possible internal to the site to reduce the cost to get it started up.
And I understand that. If you take a look at this graph here, you intended to create the traffic circle, as you said in my office.
To provide a turnaround for people when they come and when they go in and leave the site.
So if the plots on the northern portion, which are west of Christensen and to the north and west of the circle, that's one plot, which would add a great distance between Christensen. You see what I'm saying?
And we wouldn't clear this section to the east side of the main road coming in. Is that what you're thinking? And that you would that the first burial plots would be on the west side of the main road as it comes down to the cul-de-sac?
That's what I'm asking.
I don't think we have a problem with that. I don't know how if we can put that in a condition, but that would not be a problem, as far as I know.
All right.
Did you follow?
That's all I have.
And then I just wanted to touch on the fence or the wall. It's really not that's one thing that's not a cost. I mean, I think it's again, when I think about what this is going to look like, I think of a native buffer there, and not a 6-foot tall wooden fence or a concrete wall that's there. I think Commissioner Hutchinson was alluding to putting some sort of decorative fence on the inside of the buffer. I'm not sure that that's something that we're going to do, but if there is a fence placed, then I don't think we have a problem placing it on the inside of the buffer. You know, if it's, I'm not sure what the, you know, what decorative fence would go there or what it would be, but if there is a fence placed, then we don't have any problem putting it on the inside of the buffer. Now, the process what I expect to do in order, we have to get a waiver to get away from doing the wall there, and what I expect is that I will approach the neighbors, attempt to get their signatures to not do the wall or the fence, and from speaking with them, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if I get those signatures or not, and then if not, we'll bring it back before you guys and come up with a plan. So if I don't get the signatures of the residents, then you guys are going to see this project again for the waiver of the wall. You know, unless my client just decides to build it, which I'm going to be against, because I think the wall brings up maintenance issues and graffiti and everything else. So it's going to be my recommendation is to not do the wall. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just, and I don't like to do this in public, but the residents are not wrong in that the way you handle this process was probably not in the best way. I've chastised you in my office, and I've been very clear about how this board and previous boards have determined, and we want public input well in advance of anything coming to this board, because when you spend the time and take the time with the neighbors, you learn a heck of a lot more about what can be done and avoid a lot of issues that oftentimes probably shouldn't have been an issue. So I'm telling you today that I expect you to take the effort in the future when these types of plans come forward to engage the neighborhood well in advance of it coming to P&Z and especially this board.
yes, sir, I will.
Comments from the commissioners? Any other comments at this point? I think from my standpoint, I want to be cautious with the number of conditions that we put in place. And some of it is just a land rights issue that I look at. I don't know if the applicant is looking at walling in or fencing off their entire cemetery. And when you start requiring a physical wall that's only going to be present, whether it's a fence on one side of the property, I start to think about crime issues that begin to occur, in the fact that any police officer that's driving along isn't able to adequately at all see inside the property to see what may or may not be going on. And even when we start talking about buffers, I am concerned with that. You know, there's a big trend and a big push for what they call SEPTED, which is crime prevention through your landscape design. It's a lot, these are principles that they're using, and they're talking about how things are going to be done. And I just want to be sensitive and cautious about walling off everything on the east side and then making it so that it's not as readily visible for somebody to look in to see what may or may not be happening and what may happen as a result of that. So I'm a little cautious about that becoming an issue for that. If the applicant is wanting to gate off, if they're wanting to fence the entire property, then maybe that's a little bit of a different issue, but I don't know that I want to.
Mr. Chairman, I was under the impression that a lot of that was already walled by the pre-existing, or where am I missing that? Can I get staff to weigh in on that?
Yes, Commissioner Hutchinson, the Florida Recovery Center has a wall.
Looking at that diagram, can you point? Okay.
Yes, it's just along this property line of the subject parcel. It also extends along Christensen Road, and then I believe it was about 200, 300 feet along the southern portion of the subject property line.
Okay, so then it doesn't extend any, can you use your mouse, the rest of the property line, it's not?
No, this has a 10-foot buffer with the typical trees that are required and vegetation between vehicular use areas and the adjacent property.
Are you able to see from that roadway into the subject parcel?
I did drive that today. You could see in spots. It is fairly heavily vegetated, although there are some exotics, and how much of that will have to be removed, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. In the parking lot to the south, are you able to see from that parking lot into the site?
I did not notice at that particular point.
I just want to be cautious about placing that as a condition into this, especially if things move forward in a different way. I don't want to bind their hands. And maybe some of it is the fact that, whether it's the White City Cemetery or others, there is something at times about being able to look out into that area if people are wanting to, walk through there and walk a pet, and as they're going through that area, I don't know. I have those feelings.
Commissioner Maury, we have been reviewing the code, and there may be some options, and perhaps Ms. Smith can address that about whether or not we could have a landscaping, an opaque, solid landscape buffer rather than a wall or a fence.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, for the record, Karen Smith, Director of the Environmental Resources Department. The code allows for several options. It's a wall or other types of opaque fencing that provides screening. We can also allow landscaping in lieu of the wall or the fencing. However, on the residential side, that will require the approval of the neighbors. If, as Mr. Curry alluded, if the neighborhood doesn't approve landscaping in lieu of fencing, then that request for a waiver would have to come back to the board.
Okay, at this point I have conditions for a sealed vault. I have the 25-foot landscape buffer. I heard a suggestion from Commissioner Zadowski to add an additional 5 feet on the east side.
On the east side of Christensen, I guess it's the west side of Christensen.
West side of Christensen. Okay, so 30-foot landscape buffer on the east side of the subject property, which would be on the west side of Christensen Road. Talked about having the fence, if there is a fence or a wall, placed on the inside of the buffer, doing flat ground markers, vases that would be mounted. We had the gate being posted for hours of operation, having the bylaws turned over to the county. Commissioner Hutchinson, I missed one on the public. I started writing public and I neglected to finish that.
That was the one on the bylaws.
Bylaws, okay. Bylaws turned over to the county. Am I missing anything? Would the applicant like to respond to any of those?
Commissioner Maury, I believe that public one was the public hearing for any use other than a cemetery use on the property.
Thank you. That was on number 12, adding that.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify the buffer. Today, the right-of-way is going to be 60 feet. It's 50 feet today. We're given 10 feet, so then it'll be 60. And then we're given an additional, or not given, we're planting or preserving an additional 25 feet.
It'll be 85 feet
It's going to be
already.
85 feet
Okay.
already. That's correct.
I was trying to get beyond the minimum, and that achieves it at 85 feet.
That's correct.
Okay.
So then that
That's
one
more than
we're
what I
okay
had
with.
anticipated.
Okay, we're okay with the 25-foot buffer. We're okay with the concrete vault. I'm still a little sketchy on the fence, but I mean, if there is a fence proposed, I'm okay with the language. If there is a fence proposed, then it's located on the inside of the buffer. I'm okay with that language. Flat ground marker with mounted bases, I'm okay with. Gated access, I'm okay with. Posted hours of operations, I'm okay with. No other uses other than the cemetery, I'm okay with. And then copy of the operation documents to the county, I'm okay with that. So.
And I asked for consideration of your initial plotting to be on the west side of the circle in that northern west quadrant as a consideration to start your...
Not sure if the
Mr.
site
Chair,
is going to be the same one.
can I interrupt real quick? I'm getting kind of lost on that one, Commissioner Zadowski, because prior we were talking about if there was the opportunity to move that entrance down. What you're stating makes it there's where the entrance is.
Yeah, my thought process is if wherever the entrance goes is to, and whatever you're going to build, whether it's the initial road to the roundabout, is to start in the middle and work out so that you will not move toward the residence for some time. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. And I think we're okay with that. I mean,
that clearly, I just don't want it to give the perception that we're okay with the drive being there.
Okay, that's fine.
Do you need to check with your client?
No.
Are you okay with everything?
We're okay with that. I've already spoken with them.
Commissioner
Commissioners, anything else at this point in time? Staff, questions, comments that you have at this point?
Could I clarify, was it, did you want to remove the 30-foot buffer along Christensen and go with the 25 along that roadway, or maintain that?
I was trying to get to 80 feet, but when the calculations come out and the additional right-of-way has been given and the 25 feet, it actually gets to 85 feet. I was trying to get to 80 because originally I was thinking it was only 60, so.
Okay,
So
so
85
25 feet around the entire perimeter.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the board on this conditional use permit, please feel free to do so at this time. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing portion, return to the board. Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, based upon all the conditions being met by the commissioner stated here, a motion that we approve.
Subject to the conditions that were provided. There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been
And
motion and
as a
second.
comment, I just want to make sure the gopher tortoise will be handled correct. Yes. Okay, yes, okay.
Which they're required to do their
Right, I just
environmental
wanna make
impact
sure.
statement as well. So. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, staff. With that, that concludes our public hearings for this evening. The regular agenda item, we did move that forward. We have item 2 under our regular agenda, which is the North Hutchinson Island Wastewater Treatment Facility. Actually, let's take a 5-minute recess here.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yes.
We're going to come back to order here at this time. We're going to turn this over to our capable staff as we discuss the North Hutchinson Island Wastewater Treatment Facility major adjustment.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Agenda item 9A2 is the petition of St. Lucie County Utilities District's request for a major adjustment to the North Hutchinson Island Wastewater Treatment Facility major site plan. The facility is located on 4.9 acres of land area on the west side of North A1A on North Hutchinson Island. The facility was acquired by St. Lucie County Utility District in 1992. The North Hutchinson Island Wastewater Treatment Facility serves the majority of the North Hutchinson Island. The uses surrounding the subject site include the Sands Plan Unit Development, a residential development located to the west and south boundaries, real estate office to the southeast, the Sea Palms condominium to the east, and the county's recreational facility known as Pepper Park to the north. The wastewater treatment facility is currently rated to treat 500 gallons of wastewater per day. This list of improvements will increase the facility to treat 850 gallons of wastewater per day. The wastewater treatment improvements to the facility will provide the additional capacity necessary to meet the improvements to the service for future development on North Hutchinson Island, according to the county's adopted comprehensive plan.
Can I just stop you just to correct it? It's 500,000 and 850,000, so that
500.
it's, you only said 500 gallons, so just
Oh,
anybody who
sorry.
wants to know. It's a much bigger plant than that.
Okay.
So. Sorry, I just.
No, that's okay.
No worries.
The design of the proposed expansion will not interfere with the development use of the neighboring properties. The visual impacts, including noise, traffic, and environmental issues, have been addressed through the project design. The expansion does not encroach beyond the existing setback of the facility to the west, and to the expansion to the south will be set back approximately 200 feet from the south property line. Along the south property line abutting the PUD, there is an existing concrete wall, and along the west property line is a vinyl slot chain link fence. All exotic plant materials such as Brazilian peppers will be removed from this area, and oleanders, and along this area will be planted oleanders and wax myrtles for a continuous hedge. Staff has reviewed this petition and determined that it conforms to standards of review set forth in Section 110207 of St. Lucie County Land Development Code. Staff recommends approval of the proposed petition and asks that the board adopt resolution granting approval of the major adjustment to North Hutchinson Island Wastewater Treatment Facility major site plan. And that completes staff's presentation, and utility director and consultants are present to address any questions.
Thank you. Any comments from our utility director? I know you wanted to.
Actually, I didn't, but Lori Wald, Utility Director. No, I think staff from Planning and Development Services addressed everything. We're very excited to move forward with this project.
Mr. Chairman, Lori, are you going to have buffers for the additional capacity? Since we're talking buffers all night.
Buffers?
Buffers, like I see a tree line. Where's the additional capacity gone?
The additional, can you go back to the other, the larger back one maybe?
Okay.
Another one.
Okay.
It's really just extending right where she had, here, I don't have it. It's only extending to the south, and we're doing some modifications to the east, but we're not really, the footprint's not changing a whole lot, and we already have a waiver from the to the property to the west, and we're just going to expand some of our hedging there.
Okay.
So we're not putting a wall up. We've already met with them a couple times, and they're very pleased.
What I was asking for as a buffer. So if you're already going to do that, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for staff?
I'd just like to say, Mr. Chair, Lori, I'm excited about this project as well as you are, because when I first came to the county, you're one of the first persons that I toured some of the facilities with, and you were talking this project up, and the day has come that is now here, and I'm just as excited as you are, because to see what you talked about coming alive and this day coming is greatly appreciated, to be able to see your work done while you're a part of a process instead of be gone and be left out the process and something happens. So you get twofold, to see it done and to be a part of it at the same time. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Direction from the board.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Announcements. I'd actually like to make a quick statement, and I provide the statement not to get commissioners to jump in on it, but I want to make a statement. I know that the recent City of Port St. Lucie meeting, that the annexation question came up, and there were a lot of discussions that, or comments that were provided at that meeting. The comment that I want to make is just a proactive comment, which is one that I've mentioned to the press as well, which I know has not necessarily come out, but that's the fact that obviously we, as a county, I believe, have tried diligently to foster and to create a very successful working relationship with our city. And although issues at times may come up between us, I think we continually work to make sure that we have the best interests of our community at heart, and that we constantly strive to have a solid working relationship and a love for the cities that are within our community. And I'm thankful that we have been that type of a board at this point. So I commend each of you for that. And I don't think that this question here about the annexation has been anything but one of questions as well as comments that we've had, and hopefully one that, as things continue to move forward, we'll see some positive resolve. And definitely the last thing I think any of us would want is to see a deterioration in our working relationships between us and the City of Port St. Lucie. So that was just a comment that I wanted to make based upon what sort of transpired at their last meeting.
Thank you for that, because I think it's important that, and we have maintained that, and I appreciate that from this board and each of the other cities as well. I do want to go back to the public comment portion because while I did jump in on a discussion from a public comment portion, it is always my intention, whether as the chair or a commissioner sitting here, to listen to public comment, and often without interrupting an individual. However, when I listen to information that is not accurate, I think we do ourselves a disservice by not clarifying or getting proper information, because while it is public comment and it can be the individual's point of view, other individuals are hearing it, and if they take that to be set in stone, I think we do a disservice to the public on an educational standpoint, which is why I wanted to talk about why vehicle miles traveled was discussed. And it's about having future development pay for itself, as opposed to putting somebody's development on the backs of current taxpayers. That's been a position that a lot of county board members, commissioners have taken, and it's served the community well. And I appreciate the public comment. I think that's exactly what we need to have a better operating county, having open dialogue. We have been very transparent for decades, and that's been something that the county has always attempted to do in bringing the community into the fold. And while someone took offense to it, and I apologize if that was offensive to somebody. However, I will always take the position that if someone is speaking and using improper terms, or if it's not accurate, that I will take the time to state what I believe to be inaccurate. So that is why I chose to step into that conversation. I always respect public comment, and I encourage it. But when public comment becomes a situation where you're misinforming the rest of the public, I think that's a problem. So I apologize to this board and the public if they thought that I was out of line. That was not my intention. My intention was to provide proper education and information, because I think although there were, dozens of people in the audience here, there are thousands at home that may have heard information was not exactly accurate. And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation.
And I don't know that you were out of line in that sense. I think it was just the nature of the meeting, and you probably could have commented on every single comment that was made, and that may often be the case of anybody that comes up. And it's often just been one of how we handle that and how we work through it. And realizing the sentiment of tonight's meeting, I chose to just sort of try and see what I could do to try and keep things on an even keel for tonight. And I think we had a good meeting, so thank you all for that. And any other comment? Ms. Outlaw, any comments tonight? You've been so vocal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I want to introduce the county's newest volunteer, Miss Alyssa Rose, who is sound asleep under my desk.
Yes. I heard she's sound asleep under the table there. She's 6 years old. Yes. Your granddaughter. Glad to have her here in the meeting.
Thank you.
That's exciting. With that, announcements. I need to pull this. There was one announcement. Where was it? We have county offices will be closed this Thursday, July the 4th. We will be open on Friday. The County Board of Commissioners will be having our fiscal year 14 budget workshops beginning Tuesday, July the 9th, and they will run through Thursday, July the 11th. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, you also have your informal meeting on the morning of the 9th. That is still on.
Yes. That begins at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to express my wishes for a happy 4th of July to each of you, to the staff, and just as importantly, to the members of our community. Go out and celebrate our country's birth.
Thank you.
I just have one thing. Fort Pierce Exchange Club Chili Cook-Off is July 13th at the Fenn Center, and there's a skate expo in the morning. So if you're a skater, get with that undercover skate shop. And the skateboard,
rollerblade,
skateboard, and the chili cook-off, 40 entrants. So
which you're one of them?
No,
wait.
I manage the stage. I manage the stage.
I thought you had an out.
I normally have when I have something to run.
Oh.
No, please come to the chili cook-off. It's a great event.
Great. That we are adjourned.
Only time running.
Oh.